Have your childhood fibs ever had serious consequences? My mom tells me that the first day after preschool, I told her I had a really bad time. When she asked why, I told a story of how I was locked in the game closet. There was a big closet at the daycare filled with games, and I couldn't get out. I told her I could look through the little crack in the door and see all the other kids playing, and I was screaming mommy help, but mommy never came. My mom, taking the news as any mother would, cried and went to the daycare for answers. They said they saw me playing and being happy with the other kids the whole time, but she believed me until the next day when I came home and told her that me and my friend burned the preschool down with matches, and then all the little kids danced around the fire. That's just priceless. When I was younger, I told my mom that I saw a leprechaun on the way home from school. She told me that she didn't believe me, but I kept insisting. I even told her the boy across the street saw it too. So, after I got bored of telling the story, I went to my room. A few minutes later, my mom comes running into my room, going through my closet and telling me to get ready because the news is coming over. Panic has now set in. Why is the news coming over? In which she replies, because it's not every day someone sees a leprechaun. So I called them. I start bawling my eyes out, telling her I didn't really see a leprechaun and I don't want to lie to the news. She then calms me down and tells me she didn't call the news and to also never lie to her again. Can't tell if your mom's a genius or an butthole. Kind of unrelated. When my friend's dad was in middle school, a band came and performed at assembly one afternoon. Sort of a marching band type thing. He and his friends were sitting on one side of the auditorium and started discussing the band they would like to form and who would play what instrument. They called over to another friend of theirs, Lucas, who was sitting on the other side of the bleachers. Lucas, they cried, "We're starting a band. You're going to play flute." "Cool," replied Lucas in excitement. Lucas came to school the next day with a flute. "Hey, guys," he asked the group of friends, "when's our first practice?" The friends blinked at him. "Lucas, we were kidding. We're not really forming a band." Lucas laughed sheepishly. Then he went home and told his dad that it had been a misunderstanding. His dad told him, "I didn't raise a quitter." Lucas then took flute lessons for the next 3 years. Not sure he ever forgave my friend's dad and the others. Lucas is the real life version of Butters. I told my friend in 2nd grade that this other kid at school was a bad guy and he was on the run from the police. My friend confronted him and the bad guy kid punched my friend in the eye. I see the bad guy kid regularly now in a professional capacity, and sure, if he knows or remembers, he remembers. He is just beginning phase 2 in his plan to destroy your career. Better kill him first to be safe. If you watch P and don't admit to it when your mum checks your browsing history, I was young and naive. Your dad's gonna have a bad time. I was chased by a barking dog and I slipped on my way up the hill, gashing my knee. When I got home, I wanted others to appreciate my escape, so I told my parents I was chased and bitten. Of course, they said we must find this dog, so we went around the neighborhood looking for it in case it had rabies. I knew where it was, so we went there and we met the dog. Its owners showed us how nice it was. I petted it and liked it, and I couldn't in good conscience blame the dog. It was a border collie. This went on and on around the neighborhood. Lots of dogs. For about 3 hours until we exhausted dogs and decided it must have been a stray. 8 rabies shots later, I had learned my lesson. About 20 years ago, in 7th grade, I forgot that it was my girlfriend's birthday. Scrambling to figure something out before we met up after the first class of the day, I jotted down the lyrics to Dire Straits' Romeo and Juliet and said I wrote it for her. At our 10 years high school reunion, she said that she still has it and cherishes it. It's the best poem anyone's ever written for her. The greatest note she ever got. Blah blah blah. I couldn't bring myself to fess up, so I kept up the lie. I wish I could be there to see the look on her face when she eventually crosses paths with that song, and it starts to sink in. Haha. I read this really awesome kids book in 2nd grade about a grandmother who sleeps in the bathtub, or something like that. Whatever. It was about a really weird family with odd habits, and it reminded me of my family. 9 of us, including uncles, cousins and my grandmother, all lived in the same house. So I went home, and I told my family the story over dinner. I started telling it like a joke. without introducing where I had heard it from. After I was finished telling it, they all laughed so hard, like it was the most amazing thing in the world. Best story ever. Then my mother goes, "Wow, we knew you should be a writer, but this takes the cake. We need to write this down and see if we can get it published." Way to go. She presumed I came up with it myself. I didn't correct her. She fought with me for 10 years, trying to get me to write it down, telling me I was a genius. I still didn't correct her. After a few years, once I was old enough to understand the seriousness of plagiarism, I was too frightened to admit that I fibbed, even though it was a mistake. The worst part, I really do want to be a writer. It's all I've ever wanted to be. Whenever I bring up the topic of my dreams, my mother gets very frustrated that I refuse to seek publishing for the bathtub story. She'll read what I have written and say it's not as good as the bathtub story. You should write that one down. And my dreams take a tiny beating. All my work gets compared to a story I didn't even write, because I wasn't brave enough to admit to a fib. If I tell the truth now, my mother will kill me. She's told all her friends and our family the story. FML. TL. DR. Accidentally took credit for a story I didn't write in 2nd grade. Family now compares all my legit writing to the plagiarized story and isn't satisfied with the quality of my actual work in comparison. I've never told anyone this. Not really a consequence. When I was a kid, my mom owned her own store and over the weekends I would always follow her to work. Although there wasn't a lot to do, I really liked going with her because there was a hobby store a couple of stores down. I was in that phase with all the Yu-Gi-Oh cards and Magic the Gathering and those mini go-kart track cars. Well, I really wanted to buy all these things and I didn't have the money. So I would steal money from my mom from her register purse while she wasn't looking, and I mean lots of it, probably a couple hundred. And this was every weekend. Well, my mom got suspicious because the weekends was when she would count her profits money to manage her employees' paychecks. She noticed the huge discrepancy. She started to take more precautions and I got even more sneakier. I knew what I was doing was wrong and I felt bad. She set up some cameras and locks. Somehow I got through them. But after a while I stopped. I just felt really bad. Luckily, however, this led to another scandal. My mom was looking into all her assets, credit card, etc. Apparently someone stole her identity. It was one of her employees and she just found out. Her employee was also stealing money the same time I was. Well, my mom took her to court, the whole shebang, and couple of months later my mom sued. If that's right, got most of her money back, including what I stole except for cost of lawyers, and got her employee in jail. I got pretty lucky and no one knows except you guys now. I'd sneak money back into her purse now that I have money. Seems like a decent thing to do, at least for the lawyer costs. A few friends of mine and I were playing Mary Poppins, which involved us climbing a tree, getting on the roof of the house, and jumping off onto the trampoline while holding an umbrella. This was a truly stupid idea, and of course someone got hurt. One of the kids bounced into the side of the house and broke his arm. We told all of our parents that he did this all on his own, and he got into a lot of trouble. He was pretty much banned from hanging out with anyone because he was a bad seed. Maybe that doesn't sound so serious, but it definitely made for a shittier childhood for him when he would see us playing together, and he knew he couldn't join in. I still feel awful about it. I walked halfway to school on my own when I was about 6. I just felt so pleased with myself and eager to show off my walking prowess that I decided I had to soup up my story a little so that my friends were a little more impressed. Anyway, I told them that my mum had had a car crash on the way to school and she told me to walk the rest of the way on my own while the ambulance came. A little bit far-fetched and stupid, but I was weird like that. Anyway, news must have gotten around because fast forward to home time, and a whole bunch of teachers had approached my mum in the playground and asked her if she was okay. She obviously had no idea what they were going on about. Eventually a teacher said that I had been saying that she had been in a car crash in the morning. She said that I must have been lying. When we got home, she gave me a big lecture on why you shouldn't tell lies, and made me sit on the naughty stare. Not exactly serious consequences, but it seemed like it to 6-year-old me. Lost it at naughty stare. I told lies all the time when I was little. My best one was in kindergarten right after my little sister was born. I think I needed attention or something. I came in from recess one day and decided it would be fun to lose my memory. I kept saying where am I, who are you, etc. I really freaked the teachers out. By the time my mom got there, my principal was in tears. My mom took me home pretending to be all concerned, but she saw right through my act. When reminiscing about this story, she always likes to finish with "you were such a little crap." When I was in middle school, some friends and I were really into Team Fortress. Classic. We would talk about it all the time during school. One day, I was lying about some awesome maneuver involving throwing a hand grenade when a teacher in the hallway overheard me. Apparently she only picked up on the word grenade and I was reported to the office. They pulled me out of my next class, searched my locker, searched the lockers of all my friends and called my parents to come in and speak with the assistant principal. My mom blew up at the administration, rightfully so, and I ended up being on their shit list for the remainder of middle school, which also resulted in a note in my file for high school. Whoops. My mom blew up at the administration. Excellent unintentional pun. When I was 6, my friend and I decided after school that we should cut up our t-shirts with scissors. We basically clipped them into Swiss cheese. When we got home and my mother asked what happened to our shirts, we casually explained that 2 5th graders, terrifying people, really, ran up to us with scissors and started cutting our shirts. Next thing I know, I'm called into the school to testify about who did this, as they lined up several likely culprits and just needed our official word. Not realizing what I had done, we simply confessed, acting like it was obvious the whole time, and we couldn't believe anyone had believed our initial story. Oh, to think of the insane manhunts that went down due to children's misunderstanding of the consequences of lying. Well, I sort of fibbed, but I thought it was part of a game. There was this girl in my primary school and our parents were friends, so we'd be round each other's houses quite a bit, and she thought up this game. We just called it lies. Not too imaginative. All you had to do was try and get the adults to believe some stupid lie. Mostly we did silly things like I threw the cat on the roof and Laura started a fire in the bath. That one got a reaction though, I'll admit. Just stupid things, but you won if they believed you. Anyway, on one of our sleepovers, she said she was too scared to sleep on her own, so she asked for the double bed for the 2 of us, which was fine because why not? I'm a kid. However, it was not fine, and she was pretending to be asleep while getting way too handsy for comfort, not providing details here, and getting closer and closer to me, and I kept pushing her off and trying to wake her up, but with no reaction. So I went to tell my parents that she wouldn't leave me alone. The most I could manage to say, getting freaked out and all, and they never believed me and just sent me back in there, repeatedly. I spent all night sat on the floor at the foot of the bed because she boy who cried wolf fed me. One of my fibs almost caused an international incident. My father used to be a higher level scientist working at Sandia National Laboratories. I was in 2nd grade at the time, and friends with a kid whom I'll refer to as Joe. One day, Joe and I were out digging in the sand that lined our playground, when I started telling a story about how I'd been conscripted as a spy for some secret shadow organization. Joe was bright enough to wonder why such a clandestine group would be stupid enough to enlist a kid. So I told him that they were actually interested in my father, but that they needed my cooperation as well. Since the 2 of us, my father and I, have the same name, I ended the story by saying that my entire family was going to move to Las Vegas by the end of the month. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I mean, come on. It was just some crazy fabrication, and if I'd been called on it, I would have confessed. As it happened, though, I wasn't called on it. Not until Joe reiterated the entire thing to his parents. That wouldn't have been so bad, except that Joe's father was one of the security administrators for Sandia, and he took the tale very seriously. The day after I'd told my little fib, my mother sat me down and had a talk with me. She asked why I'd told such a terrible lie, and insisted that she had taught me better than that. I didn't really understand what was so bad, until she told me that Joe's father had personally interviewed my father about my story, which was a stroke of insane luck. If he had filed an official report, there would have been some pretty far-reaching consequences for my father, for the laboratory where he worked, and for the Ukrainian scientist who had come from Las Vegas less than a week prior. TL. DR. Second graders should not be spies. Boy, that escalated quickly. I used to go to my cousin's grandparents' farm when my aunt was still married to their dad. I don't think I could have been older than 4. Once, while visiting there, I went with them and their dad fishing in a pond. I remember being suddenly filled with terror at the edge of that pond. A crocodile lurking under the water. I live in the United States in an area devoid of any large reptiles, but hey, I was little. I ran back to the house, and later when I went to the bathroom, the toilet frightened me as well. Would the croc come through the pipes to bite me on my butt? I didn't want to find out. I held it in. A few days later I was home and I finally peed, but my pee-pee, what I called my vagina, hurt and itched. I had an infection. And when I was asked what happened, I made something up. I lied a lot as a child. I told them my older cousin, who was like 10, had put ladybugs in my underwear. Years later, my mom told me this made her think he had touched me or something, and no amount of me explaining my childish fears would soothe her. Such WTF. When I was 8 or 9, I had some kind of spooky theme activity book. You know, with word puzzles and searches and all that junk to keep a young mind occupied. I was doing one of those decode the secret message puzzles where you had to use the keypad on a phone to determine what the letters were, when for some reason, I decided it would be a good idea to call the number I was supposed to be decoding. It was some unreasonable amount of digits long, but I still managed to reach some family's voicemail. I figured since I was doing a spooky themed book, I should leave a spooky message. Genius. I can't remember what I said, but I vaguely recall it being pretty unsettling. I hung up, then went outside to play. Few hours later, my parents start asking if my siblings and I had used the phone at any point. Well, of course I say no. Heck, if I'm getting in trouble, they take our word for it. I guess whatever I had said had been just that creepy that my parents figure I wouldn't have been capable of saying it, and start getting worried. Apparently the people I'd left the message for had backtraced the number and called my mom to tell her about it. She was now freaking out that someone had broken into our house and was still hiding somewhere inside. They even considered calling the cops. I felt awful, but I never told them the truth. Once they backtrace it, consequences will never be the same once they call the internet police. I was crossing the Canadian border with my dad when I was like 10 or so, and I thought it would be hilarious to tell the border guard I had no idea who the strange man accompanying me was. My dad's face went from normal to shock to anger very quickly, and we were detained for a short while despite me saying it was a joke. My dad was not happy with me, and it wasn't that hilarious. This wasn't childhood, it was teenage years, but yeah, it was the morning of 4/20, and driving randomly in my truck we find a good condition couch being thrown out. My friend and I grabbed it and threw it in the back. Cue an awesome day of smoking and riding around on a couch in the bed of the truck. General 420 fun. A couple days later we need to ditch the couch. Living on campus and being stupid, didn't have much place to do it, so we pulled to a local park and decided to leave it on the ground by a picnic table so we could have it there in the future for chillin' yo. As we put it on the ground, this guy comes over and starts yelling at us to put it back. We're like, dude, we're just leaving this here for a friend, he'll be by to pick it up. Then he pulls out a badge and he's an off-duty cop. Crap, so he takes my details for illegal dumping and I leave with the couch. It rides around in the back with me for a few days before I see my parents again. I told them the story. I didn't get in trouble, so they thought it was pretty humorous. But I still had to get rid of it and they didn't want it at the end of their driveway. So I took it back to campus, in a different jurisdiction than that cops, and illegally dumped it at the side of the parking lot, this time without getting caught. My parents asked what happened to it. I didn't want to tell them I repeated the stupid illegal mistake. They wouldn't find it funny twice, so I quickly told them it was stolen out of my truck. Pretty convenient. Hey, someone came up and took it. Good for them. They were very upset. They thought this was awful news. Suddenly they think I live on a terrible campus full of crime. Nothing is safe. People bringing their own trucks to rob other cars in the parking lot. They made me file a police report anyways, and my pleas of the couch was trash and I didn't want it had no effect. I had to then speak with an officer about it and how it went missing. What a coincidence. The campus police had located my couch, dumped into the ditch by my very own parking lot. Funny thing that, I hadn't even seen it there. Then they returned it to me and I had no choice but to accept it. I finally drove the couch far away to some neighborhood and dropped it off at the end of someone else's driveway. They watched me from the window but didn't do anything. Now my mom flips out when I'll leave things in the back of the truck unattended for even brief times, or bringing anything valuable to campus. There are thieves afoot. TLDR. Stole a couch and had a hard time getting rid of it. Had to lie to the police and make written records and reports of my lie. When I was around 7 years old, my sister and I were selling lemonade in front of our house. We were racking in the cash when this guy in a black SUV pulls up. He asks us if we've seen his kid go by on a scooter. We both respond, nope, and the guy pulls away. About half an hour later, we tell our mom this story of how this guy came looking for his son and asked us to get in the car with him and assist him in locating him. I said he offered us candy as a reward or some crap like that if we found him. My mom, being the responsible parent, freaked out and called the police. LOL oops. Several cops come to our house for questioning and we tell them the exact same story. The cops say that they will do their best to find this man and bring him in for questioning. I don't know what happened after that. A substitute teacher in 3rd grade humiliated me when I gave a stupid answer to her question. I thought milk was cow's pee. She mocked me and then went on to explain milk came from cow's udders, just like milk from a woman's breast. I went home and told my mom my teacher was talking about her boobs in class. As my mom asked more questions, I contrived how she was squeezing them and talking about how big they were. That substitute was never invited back. I don't like what you did, but the thought of a substitute that humiliated children when they gave incorrect answers not being invited back doesn't really bother me. When I was a kid, I actually loved school and had perfect attendance. One day, I got sick and had to stay home. For some reason, I thought that illness was not a proper excuse to not go, so the next day, I told my teacher my grandmother had died and I had gone to her funeral. She decided to call my parents to offer her condolences. The next week, my grandmother actually ended up in the hospital due to a bad fall. It wasn't my fault, but I felt guilty for lying about it. When I was around 6, I told my older step-siblings about this girl I had a crush on. For some reason, I convinced them that I had sex with her the summer before, despite not having much of a clue what I was talking about. I made up a bunch of details, where and when we did it, etc. Apparently they believed me. A few days later, my sister found some reason to blackmail me, and threatened to tell my dad about it. Of course, he overheard our little fight, and I ended up in his room with my stepmom, having a closed door, very serious talk. I didn't have the words to explain myself. I tried to tell them it was all a lie, but they insisted that I explain exactly what I had said to my sister. I was crying, which to them implied that what I said was true. Really, I was mortified at having to repeat it all to them. They refused to believe that I made it up. So, to this day, my dad and stepmom think that I lost my virginity in kindergarten. I lost my virginity in kindergarten. Just keep up this lie your whole life. In 4th grade, many of the kids decided getting glasses would be a fun idea, even though we didn't need them. So, we all managed to convince our parents that we did need them. Now, nearly 10 years later, I'm still being told I have a prescription for glasses that needs to be fulfilled that I don't need. In the 2nd grade, I lied about what I did over summer vacation. I was wearing a hand-me-down shirt from the Hard Rock Cafe in some town that I do not remember, and said that we went there and that is where I got the shirt. I felt bad because I went to a public school that had a bunch of rich kids and I was poor and they all went on awesome vacations and I did nothing. My teacher found out, tried to bust me out, and eventually got fired over trying to bust me out. Unhelpful elementary teacher sees you lie about going on an awesome vacation to rich kids, tries to bust you and humiliate you in front of everyone. When I was in 7th grade I made a baseball bat in wood shop. The day I finished I was so proud and I brought it home. My mom hadn't gotten home from work yet and the neighbor kid had come over to check it out and noticed my BB gun next to the back door. I told him it was a crappy gun. You could see the BB come out of it because it was so underpowered, and that I could even shoot the window of my dad's truck and it wouldn't break. I had done this before and it didn't. First shot, bam, broken window. Told the parents I hit a baseball through it, because if my dad had found out I was playing with the gun while nobody was home, my butt would have been beaten. Nobody was mad, I just had to clean up the mess. 6 months later I'm playing with the dog in the yard, and I roll over and feel a knife stinging on my arm. One of the tiny shards of safety glass cut my arm open, about 6 inches, and 20 stitches were required. Maybe it's not really a fib going badly, but after that day I definitely believed in karma. When I was in the 4th grade I dropped a softball down the 5 inches sewer drain in our backyard. It fit just perfectly and I left it there. Later that night the toilets were backing up and my dad, as he usually did, enlisted my help to teach me about how to fix problems around the house. We went into the backyard and it was flooded with crap water. He knelt down into the crap and placed his hand into the mouth of the sewer drain but he couldn't get it down. He looked at me and said, "You're gonna have to reach down there since your arms are the smallest in the house." I knelt down and reached into the drain. The crap water was about 6 inches from my face and I was about shoulder deep in it when I pulled the ball out, covered in toilet paper. My dad looked at me accusingly and I could only reply, "I saw the dog playing with the ball earlier." I guess there weren't severe consequences but it was a fib nonetheless. Not childhood but this happened in my teens. This might get confusing but I had been dating a girl named, all of these names are fake, Chelsea for a year. We broke up when she moved to college during my junior year. She was older, but we're still on and off. So, we haven't been dating for a month or so and I get a MySpace message from a girl I had met recently at a concert. We'll call her Kelly. She asked if I wanted to come hang out with her and her friend, Alex. She also said they were home alone. Cool, I'll be over in a bit. Keep in mind, I have only met one of these girls very briefly and don't know much about her. I get out to her house and she lives near Chelsea's parents' house. This kind of worried me because Chelsea and I were in different school districts and lived about 15 miles, 24 km, apart, so it was unusual that I'd run into someone that she might know. I get to the house and I end up having a threesome with them. Immediately after, Kelly starts going off about how great of a boyfriend I would be and how she would want to date me. After some small talk, I figure out that she goes to the school Chelsea went to, though they don't know each other, and she is friends with some people Chelsea is friends with. I get a little worried that Chelsea might find out about this. I was planning on going to the same school as her the next year and if she found out, it might ruin things, so I dip out of there. Over the next month, I get a frick load of texts from Kelly, almost non-stop. I didn't respond so finally, she stops texting me. A month after that, I get a text from Chelsea's best friend Sam, whom I haven't talked to in the months. "Did you have a threesome with Kelly and Alex, huh?" Number. I know who they are, though. Kelly has been stalking me on the MySpace. It's freaking creepy. Haha, yeah. Sounded too weird to be true. They're telling everybody in their friend group that it happened. Well, Sam ends up telling everybody that Kelly and Alex are liars. They lose all of their friends' trust and a lot of them stop talking to Kelly and Alex. I still feel really bad about it. TLDR, I had a threesome with some girls. I lie about it and say I didn't. The girls lose a lot of their friends. What is the longest running lie you have continued to tell? I was seeing this girl once back in college that was also a workout buddy after our classes. She had really bad body odor when she got to sweating, but we are in the gym a lot so of course it's going to happen. However, instead of just telling her about it, I told her I could never notice it because I didn't have a sense of smell. Well, this lie spread from this one girl all the way to my family that still believes that I don't have a sense of smell. It's been 8 years and I still can't add to any conversations about the smell of rain or a new candle that somebody bought. I'm in too deep at this point, so I'm gonna ride this bee out till they put me in the ground. When I first started dating my ex-wife, I told her my little brother was Samoan. This is because though he is 6 years younger than me, he is about 6 inches taller, much broader, and his hair is way dark. Compared to the rest of the family, she didn't think anything of it. Met my brother. She even understood that we both had the same parents. It just never clicked with her. She would bring it up occasionally and I'd just go along with it. Eventually she brought it up at a family dinner and my whole family was like, what? Then we got divorced. Don't really do it anymore, but for years in middle and high school I would tell everyone that me and another kid were related since we had the same last name, since I knew it annoyed him. My sister and I used to tell people we weren't related at all. We just lived together because parents kicked her out of the house. One of my classmates and I convinced all the freshmen that we were brother and sister, but our parents were divorced. They believed until about 2 years later when we joked about dating. I didn't want crab salad my wife, then GF, had made, so I told her I was allergic to shellfish. Continued for about 10 years when we went to go visit my family in CA and didn't want to pass up this awesome seafood place. I got better. At the beginning of the year in school, we were all supposed to tell the class one interesting thing we had done over the summer, and I of course had stayed home and done nothing all summer, but I didn't want everyone else to know that. So when it came to be my turn I just made something up. For some reason the first thing that came to my head was Africa, and that's what I said, that I went to Africa. For years I've had to remember who heard that, and to keep my lie going. It has been the most stressful thing I've ever done. At least Africa was nice though. I wrote erotica for many years before I switched over to romance novels. Glorious filth that basically allowed me to pay off my student loans. If anyone in my family asks, I was writing corporate reports. No one has ever asked me what a corporate report is. Thankfully, because I'm pretty sure my response would be something along the lines of, you know, it's business stuff for businesses, followed by me repeating the word synergy until they went away. Explanation of public and private relationships with deep physical market penetration in both standard and non-standard openings. Discussion of implausible firm members performing for unrealistic time frames, resulting in overly expressive artificial outcomes. I posted this a while back. Many years ago, back in our teenage years, my younger sister landed her first job and was so proud that she was able to use her own money to buy Christmas presents for her siblings. While not extravagant, her gift to me was a box of chocolate-covered mints. Now, I'm not a big fan of said mints, but I could see how much it meant to her, so I pretend like they were delicious. Like full on savoring every bite. I'm talking some Meryl Streep level acting. So much so, that I finished the box in minutes flat. This makes such an impression on her, that she has bought the same chocolate covered mints for me every year since. It's been almost 30 years that I've kept up the charade. This is where it gets dark. About 5 years ago, I met my wife. On our first Christmas together, she's looking for cute ideas on what to buy me. Cue her talking to my family and it comes out how much I love chocolate covered mints. I get them every year, my sister says, and always finish the box before eating breakfast. Wife thinks this is a perfect way to celebrate our first holiday together. A little taste of home. Now, for the past 5 years, the lie I had only had to live through on Christmas has become the living heck of each and every week. No one knows my secret shame. Anytime my wife wants to surprise me with a sweet, motherfucking chocolate covered mints. When my sister and I were kids, we were sleeping on an inflatable mattress at home. We had just gotten back from the seaside and weren't quite ready to part with it, so we got to sleep on it one last night. Well, rather than sleep, we were playing, jumping, etc, and at one point my sister jumped and broke a vase that my parents had gotten as a present when they got married from quite close friends. It always had candy in it. My mom rushed in, my sister started crying, and I immediately started apologizing, saying how I accidentally knocked it over. I didn't mean to, etc, etc. I got my butt chewed out for that, but my younger sister just kept crying. The mattress was immediately taken away of course and we went to bed. Now, it's 20 years later, my parents still think that I was the one who broke it. When we get together, one of us will sometimes mention it in passing. Not how I thought that story was going to turn out. Username added hint of NSW. But congrats on your pure soul. Amazing there are people still out there uncorrupted by the internet or Reddit. Growing up, my brother, mom, and I went to visit my grandma one day. On the way home, we found a puppy on the side of the road and brought it home with us. We had that dog for like 12-14 years. He passed away last July. He was a huge German shepherd, like 6 feet long from snout to the end of his tail. He was as big as our Saint Bernard. Because my grandma lives in the mountain area, we live in the foothills. We would always joke that he was a wolf or something that we just brought home. Nope. My mom took me and my brother to the pound that day to pick out a puppy because she wanted one. Only us three. And the internet. No. And we still haven't told our dad or our other siblings. Not so much a lie as an omission of truth. When I was 15, my parents and siblings went out of state and I was left to house sit and mind the dogs. Wasn't supposed to have anyone over, but of course, I did. So my 2 friends and I had taken out all my dad's guns and spread them out on the floor in the living room just to mess around with them. The only loaded gun was the .357 revolver, which I unloaded. Pretty much just dry firing them a couple times. Anyways, when we were done, I reloaded the revolver and told Mike I reloaded it. He acknowledged he heard me while still playing a game on my Sega Genesis. Minutes later, I'm playing the game. Leo, other friend, is upstairs on the computer and Mike is sitting next to me. All of a sudden the whole house fills with the crack of a firearm going off. I drop the controller and look over at Mike, who is pale as a sheet with the revolver in his hand. Leo almost falls down the stairs running to see what happened. Mike had been twirling the gun around his finger when it went off. The round went through the wall separating the living room from my parents' bedroom and about 2 inches from hitting the wood stove pipe that goes up through the 2nd story and into the roof. I checked my parents' room to see where the slug went, but there is no exit hole. Mike's freaked out. We lived in a pretty small community where most people at least knew of everyone else, and my dad was one of the 2 sheriff's deputies on the West Shore. Mike was always the good kid in town, so he was all over himself with panic that his parents would find out and left for home. Leo and I grabbed some spackle and patched the hole, even griming the patch so it matched the discoloration of the rest of the wall since it sat behind a wood stove. 27 years later, my parents still don't know what went down while they were gone. I figure there's still a round stuck in a stud behind the wall. What scared me straight was the thought of Mike accidentally blowing his head off in my living room. I cleaned the gun, and good thing, because when my parents came home, my dad actually smelled the guns to see if any of them had been fired. One of the very few things I got away with as a kid. Pretty lucky. I lied about going to a bartending competition as an excuse to not go on a date in 1991. I realized that I was still telling it 15 years later to people it had absolutely no bearing on. I had told the lie so many times that it became ingrained as part of my story. I literally stopped myself in mid-sentence and said, "Wait, no I didn't. I totally lied about that," and hence released the untruth from myself forever. Okay, really it was no burden. I thought it was kind of funny to be thoughtlessly still lying about something completely insignificant so many years later. Not me, but this kid in high school pretended to be Australian for 3 years. Our school was in California. Everyone believed him, even when he practiced his American accent on the phone whenever his mom called because she didn't like when he used his Australian accent. The lie fell apart when he took one of his GFS home to meet his family. She then made him go around the entire school and apologize for lying to everyone. One day when I was 8, I was in the car with my dad and the song Rock and Rock All Night by Kiss came on the radio and I decided to sing along to it. I knew my dad loved classic rock and I figured it would be nice to share a moment with him. He took it as me being spontaneously inspired by the music, and he still brings it up 16 years later. Best not to tell him I was throwing him a bone at the time. Similar thing with me, my uncle, and ZZ Top. Cue a ZZ Top Greatest Hits CD for my next birthday. We were just fishing and he liked it, and I wanted him to think I was cool and grown up, so I exaggerated how much I was enjoying the music. That I am allergic to pot. Told this to get out of trying it when I was 15. For various reasons have had to keep it up for 20 years. I have no problem with weed smokers. I just don't like having to get hassled when I turn it down. Not that that happens much anymore. See, I actually am, and people are total douches about it, saying they don't believe me, telling me to try it anyway, blowing smoke in my face. Like, no, I will actually swell up, barf all over you, and black out. Stop. I'm pretty good friends with a colleague that teaches the same group of kids that I do. One day in class, I made an off-the-cuff comment about how we don't get along. The kids believed it, so I went with it and texted her to go along with it too. We kept it going for almost 2 years with the kids openly bad-mouthing each of us in the other's classes. Now that's commitment. That I like my best friend's husband. He's a vile, bitter, hateful human being who thinks he's better than everyone. I have literally not told anyone. Now we know. SAT score. I always tell people I scored in 1140. This was when 1600 was highest. It's a believable score for someone who sucks at math like me. I got below 1000 twice. Just so you know, 1600 is the highest again. Don't ask me why they changed it. Basically everything about how university is going to my parents. They've been pressuring me for months about it, so if they found out I've done nothing with myself for almost 2 months they'd just be disappointed. Yeah, I'm doing fine. Yeah, I'm going out and not just staying in all the time. Yeah, I have friends. I'm in the same boat, random stranger of the internet. I tell my parents that I'm not completely alone when in fact all of the conversations I have at the university is polite conversation with the subway worker. That I don't want to get married. I actually do. I don't want kids though, and I feel like I'd be bad in a relationship. It's been a long time since I was a boyfriend, and who wants to marry a guy that doesn't want kids? Maybe I'm biased, since I can't conceive naturally, but it wouldn't be a deal breaker for me. There are plenty of people, such as yourself, for whom kids aren't a requirement. I get most of my news and information through Reddit. I pass it off as something I heard from a friend. If I divulge my source, everyone will start using Reddit and I won't have anything interesting to say. LOL, same. Or people won't know what Reddit is, or they might not take it seriously as a source. Almost all of my stories start off with "so I read this thing" or "I heard that some people do this." That losing an arm didn't affect me that much. It's now been 8 or 9 years I've lost it. I was such a good liar, even I believed it at some point. Then I had to make the choice of putting down my dog or letting him suffer to his death after a 4 hours long stroke. But you know, I'm a man. Then my GF left me. I was distant and detached from my feelings, and she found someone who was more in tune with her, throwing a 10-year relationship to the side. Heck, at first I just shrugged her life. I was able to survive on my own, but slowly but surely the mask shattered. My ex and a friend I confided in saw behind the mask when I was at my lowest, but most friends and family still think everything is fine, and I was more aggravated for the doctors cutting my hair than my arm. Dude, just wait till we get bionic limbs. You're gonna be the sickest mother out there. My first day on the job at a local fast food restaurant, we were robbed at gunpoint. It was my first job as a teenager and I knew if I told my parents they would make me quit. When they asked how my first day went, I said fine. When I was 14 and in a long distance race during gym class, my friend tripped over my leg. It was pretty crowded and rolled over in front of all those people. She blamed someone else and has no idea it was me. It's been 20 years. We're still friends and she'll never know. Mwahaha. I live in the UK where being circumcised isn't that common. I am circumcised. I also have a massive beard. When I first met my ex, I told her very seriously that I was circumcised because I was Jewish. She believed it for way longer than she should have. Same. Ended up with extra holidays for 6 months before I moved jobs. I'm gay. My mom always thought I was gay and did one of those coming out parties. Just kinda rolled with it even though I have a girlfriend. I invented a mentally disabled younger brother when I was at university and used him as an excuse to get out of seminars early to go and take care of him. I hated you in group work. Sick grandmother that you know will die 4 days before work due date. Frick her. Entered her contribution separately. 1 paragraph. A couple of years back, when I was living in my apartment complex, I had a neighbor convinced that I was some sort of government agent, spy, etc. It was a neighbor who I would constantly see in passing, seemingly always when I was either leaving or arriving to my apartment. It was usually odd hours, 7 am 7 pm. I also don't work on Mondays, but also sometimes work on the weekends, so my schedule probably seemed very erratic. Combine that with the fact that I would always be carrying multiple, nondescript bags, usually camera equipment, my gym bag or hockey stuff. Sometimes I would be carrying my range bag for when I went to the shooting range to practice or for a competition. One time, after unloading from the range, a few stray empty shell casings must have spilled out from my bag and around my car. I didn't see them until I came back out later in the day and saw my neighbor. She pointed them out and asked me, "What do you do for a living?" In a very dramatic, serious tone. I replied, "I work in asset protection and asset recovery." After a couple of silent moments, with a puzzled look she asked, "What does that mean?" Furthering the ruse, I replied, "I protect things that are very valuable to very important people and I recover very valuable things from very bad people." The look that came across her face was priceless. I immediately turned and walked away as a punctuation on an Oscar-worthy performance. She bought a hook, line and sinker. I made it about 10 steps before I started laughing hysterically to myself. I kept up that persona for the next 2 years. I'll be honest, it was pretty fun. Well, not me but my father, and it's kind of morbid. My parents live in a pretty big house and have a patch of land for horses. Once a year my father hires a farmer that lives nearby to cut the grass with a large machine attached to a tractor. The farmer did as requested and drove the tractor through the land. However, once he was about halfway he suddenly heard a loud shriek. Turns out the neighbor's cat was there and he cut off all 4 paws clean. Must have looked pretty horrific. But worst of all, the cat was still alive. The farmer rushed to my dad to tell him what happened. My father brought a shovel and released the cat from its misery. It was quite heartbreaking. Right after, they buried the cat there in the field. To this day, nobody ever told the neighbors. The cat simply went missing and never returned. Nobody had the heart to tell them what happened. I applaud your family for that secret, really. I would not want to know any of my pets had that be their last moments. Better to dream they found a new family that cared for them, even if deep down I didn't believe that. In 3rd grade a girl moved to my school and instantly I had the biggest crush on her. When we got to talking she was convinced that she knew me from her old school. 3rd grade logic was to lie and say that I did go there and just moved as well. It started as just a quick "yeah, that was me," so that her and I would have something to talk about, but quickly progressed into elaborate stories about other classmates or teachers there and even included stories about our play dates that we had. This went on extensively from 3rd grade until 10th grade when I moved away. A friend of mine and I who go to the same college constantly tell people we're siblings because we look alike. We have like at least 10 people who believe it now. Funniest part is that my actual sister goes to the same college as well. That I miss my family. Everyone is always telling me how sorry they are for me and how hard it must be to have no contact with them anymore, and it's just too much to try and explain that I have zero emotional attachment to any of them. The one time I tried explaining it to someone they kept shrugging it off like, "Oh, you just need some time to move past it and then you'll get along again and be one big happy family." Even if I get into the deep dark depths of their betrayal, life, long abuse and neglect, I still get the same answer. Why is it so odd that sometimes families just don't work out? It's perfectly acceptable and encouraged to completely cut ties with ex-friends and lovers who treat you like crap. So why the double standard just because we're related? I told one colleague that I played 2 seasons at a local football club which is in the 3rd German division in my youth. I'm not bad at football and sometimes I help his team out when they have too little players, and he always says yeah, he is pretty good, he played at club name in his youth, and then I get asked about my time there. He also told it to some colleagues and sometimes some of my friends are doing an internship at my work and I always hope that he doesn't talk with them about it. I don't know why I told him this. I wish I didn't. But the good thing is I have friends who played there in their youth, so I have all the info I need to keep this up. It's been 3 years. Wish me luck. And with football I mean football, but some may call it soccer. You would say too few players. In general, if it's something you can count you say too few. If it's something you can't count you would say too little. For example, too few players versus too little energy. Most English speakers have trouble with that. I'm pretty sure I get it wrong half the time. That I'm Christian. I have told friends and more understanding family members my true beliefs. But my 90-something-year-old grandparents are going to die thinking their sweet little Evan dude is a good Christian boy. Sometimes keeping the peace is good. I had a strange Spanish teacher. She was extremely gullible and might have been too old for teaching. One day she called roll and I told her my name was Billy and that my real name was just my twin brother. Everyone went along with it. For 3 years I would put a jacket on when I was me and take it off when I was Billy. Teachers would send appreciation letters to us occasionally and I have two, one for me and one for Billy. I'm not sure if I found it funny or if I was hurt when she came to see Billy's graduation and not mine. Because Billy didn't wear that jacket. That I'm allergic to bananas. I'm not allergic. It's just that the smell of them makes me physically sick. It's easier to say I'm allergic for people to not open them around me than it is to justify my physical reaction. My wife tells places that she's allergic to pickles because she hates pickles so much. I don't think anyone on earth is allergic to a pickle. That I hate caramel. I don't know why I ever said it. Don't know how to change it now that everyone thinks that. I actually really enjoy caramel. This one you could change in steps. Oh, I found this kind of caramel I actually like. Then I've gained a new appreciation for caramel. My wife and I tell people we met through a mutual friend. In reality she randomly added me on Facebook and was like IBBY, you fine as frick. Her family is just packed with uptight judgmental people. It's just easier to tell the lie. I met a GF on MySpace the same way. Talked everyone it was a blind date. That everything is fine and I'm happy. It's not, but I don't know why not or how to fix it. I've been trying to get therapy for a little while but the NHS provided ones have burned me so many times. And the private therapists with evening appointments either don't reply or aren't taking patients. Like, people just say see a therapist when you're depressed like it's easy, but it's just not. In kindergarten, a friend of mine and I found one of those old stove kettles you boiled water with outside on the playground. We filled it with wet sand to make it heavy and decided to throw it high in the air towards each other. So much fun. What you think was bound to happen, happened. I got it right in the head, which cracked my skull open and has now given me a scar. However, I tell people that I was playing in the nearby sandbox, and some idiot thought it'd be fun throwing around that kettle which then hit me in the head. I feel so stupid that I to this day cannot admit I was actually a part of it myself. My very close friend is the only person in the world I've told the true story to about 10 years after it happened. Yikes. Hi, thanks for calling X Restaurant. This is Zedric69. How can I help you? Hi, insert more common, similar sounding name. I need X. Doesn't correct them over the course of a 10 minutes conversation. Hates myself every minute of it. I had a couple attempts at suicide. Went to therapy, a few weeks at a mental hospital. Family knew I had depression, but not that it got that bad. When I was in AP biology in high school, I had a really difficult time reading litmus tests. I think the lighting at my lab station must have been off, because my answer was always incorrect. I was so frustrated that I ended up telling the teacher I was colorblind. Because it was AP Bio, she ended up making an example of me when it came time to demonstrate hereditary traits. Maybe you are colorblind, or maybe you just have a different idea of what constitutes a specific color, like the difference between gray-blue and blue-gray. I often find myself arguing with my friends about what color something is if the color is very borderline. What is the most ridiculous freaked up lie your parents told you? My dad got fed up of watching Barney the dinosaur when I was a kid, and one day when I asked to watch it, he said, "You can't." Why? Because Barney died. I never did watch Barney again. That if I didn't brush my teeth, tiny teeth goblins would sneak into my room at night and pull out my teeth while I slept. I was genuinely afraid of the teeth goblins. Not too freaked up, but ridiculous. When I was little, my mom told me if I didn't finish my dinner my stomach would get very hungry and come up and eat my brain. A few nights later I woke her up at midnight crying because my stomach growled and I needed a second dinner or it would eat my brain. A lot more tame than the other ones here, but my mum once told me not to sleep on my left cause that causes pressure on your heart. Not sure how true that was, but I was nervous for years whenever I had to sleep on my left side. I heard that on Roseanne and absolutely believed it. That my siblings and I had a sister named Alice. Apparently she wouldn't stop talking in the car, so they dropped her off on the side of the road. Never spoke on road trips ever again. My parents had a similar thing. They would threaten to leave myself and my brother at a bad boys school ran by Mrs. Mullins if we didn't behave in the car. You can imagine my trepidation when I got to secondary school and my teacher was named Mrs. Mullins. Around the time Toy Story first came out, my dad drove an Infinity and he told us that he could press a button and go to infinity and beyond to jump over other cars. He'd have us close our eyes and press the button and he'd speed up and pass the car in front of us while our eyes were closed. As a kid I was DUMBFOUNDED and thought he was magic. It's actually a nice memory compared to the other ones on here, lol. Had a somewhat abusive father growing up. Only bone I ever broke was his handiwork. Both he and my mother insist to this day that it never happened. That I broke my foot in a marching band accident must have just slipped my mind. Wasn't surprised when the term gaslighting became more prevalent in society. Remember, we discussed, few years ago, and we've been planning for it, that you'll stay in the nursing home for now. When I was a kid my father told me about the can. He said it contained a family secret of incredible value, and that when I turned 18 I could see it. On my 18th birthday I asked my father about the can. He said the frick is a can, and after I reminded him of it, he burst out laughing, saying that he was fricking with me. For almost a decade I believed that I would be privy to some cosmic secret on my 18th birthday. Turns out I'm just very impressionable. I thought he would hand you a can of beer. My dad died in a car accident a few years ago. Until this day my mom says that he is still on vacation. I don't know if it is a coping method for her, but I haven't said anything about it. Wow, I'm sorry to hear. That can't be easy. We used to have a farm when I was a kid. My uncle gave me few hens he had and I told my dad that I want them to have baby chicks and sell them. He told me we need to buy you a rooster for your hens. I said why? They lay eggs and they don't need to have a male around. He told me the eggs won't be fertile and will never hatch. But what can a rooster do to make it hatch? He picks the back of their necks. Well, I can do that with a needle every day. And then he farts in their butts. The worst part I remember is me running to my mom after we went home to tell her about my recent discovery. I fail to see how farting in their butt isn't even more ridiculous than the truth. I lived with my grandma until I was 16. My mom is currently telling me that never happened and she never left me with grandma. I guess I imagined my entire childhood. Don't give in, even jokingly. It's what she wants. My mom lied about my father's death for 9 years until my brother posted the anniversary of him hanging himself. He is my half brother, same dad, different mom. A lot of these are sad, so here's a silly nice one. My birthday is the 11th of July. The gas station 7/11 gives away free slushies on 7/11. At 7, 8, and 9 years old my parents just told me that the 7/11 wanted to celebrate my birthday by giving me free slushies and I did not question it. I thought the gas station just really liked me. In a similar vein, my name starts with a K, and when I was little my town had a Kmart that had a giant neon red K outside it. They told me the K was there just for me, and some nights they'd drive me over to look at my K all lit up. That backfired a bit when the Kmart went out of business and that giant K went dark. Gaslighting. About obviously wrong or easily disputable things. Like, I hated the babysitter I had from age 3 to 4. She was a bee who favored boys and didn't much like me either. I was an easygoing kid, but I hated her. My mother insisted all the way through college that I loved this woman. We'd go back to visit my hometown, and she'd force me to skip seeing my friends to visit this lady. At 16, these visits would go something like, "Hi, oh, it's you," and then she'd ignore me and talk to my mother while I stared at a wall and nodded politely until we could leave. My mother doubled down on this every time I disagreed until one visit back to the church we used to attend, social center of small towns. This lady saw my mother coming and began the conversation with, "Wasn't it funny how much your daughter and I always hated each other? I only watch little boys these days. Can't stand girls." My mom briefly attempted to convince both of us that we shared fond memories, but by that point we were approaching 20 years of mutual dislike. It was a bit absurd. I don't know what's worse, that your babysitter is a huge B or your mom is delusional. If I acted up, my mom would say she was sending me to the hospital to be put down. It really fricked me up. She even drove a sobbing, puking me to the hospital to be put down one day. She said she would give me a second chance and didn't take me in. My dad once told me if I didn't say a single word the whole way home, he'd take me to Arby's. In the driveway, I came to the realization that we couldn't go to Arby's, as we were home. Me, we're not going. Are we? Him, well, you talked just now, so guess not. Man, that's no fair. I got told to play the if you don't talk, we'll get fast food game. But they actually took me to McDonald's and had to spend 10 minutes convincing me it was okay to talk so I could tell them what I wanted to order. Reading these comments thinking that having one alcoholic parent feels normal now because you all have messed up childhoods. Had 2 raging narcissists who hated each other and had 4 more kids than they should have. 0. Plenty of abuse but mostly neglect. Feeling lucky after reading some crap here. When my parents didn't want to go through the effort of having me join a sport or a club at school, they just told me I would be terrible at it and should give up. When I was younger, I learned that mushrooms were a fungus and refused to eat them. My dad made me some soup with mushrooms in it and I threw a fit about eating it. So he inspected the bowl and told me they were whale toes. Apparently I was old enough to know that mushrooms were a fungus but not old enough to know that whales didn't have feet. When my dad wanted me to stop bothering him, he would send me on aimless errands. Go to the shed and get me the chain stretcher. I'd be looking for hours. Parents always claimed we were a poor family growing up, so didn't have money for sport clubs, hobbies or expensive school trips. Got older and realized it was due to the amount of money they would spend on weed. They still don't see it as an issue to this day. Similar for me, except it was booze. My old man would put away 20+ beers a night. Adds up pretty quick. They told me kids came from a government agency called the CAA, Child Assignment Agency, and that they can exchange me whenever they want if I ever misbehaved. They told me they were eyeing a well-behaved little girl but hadn't decided yet. They used it against me for years. Oh, I was told I was getting sent back to the little boy store and they would always point to a friendly special needs kid at my school they would replace me with. I was 3'5". Kinda messed me up a bit as a kid. My cat died and my mom told me that he moved to Florida. Sorry, but this one made me laugh a little. It's not that fricked up, but it's kind of a revenge story. When I was very young, my parents told me I couldn't get carbonated soft drinks cause they said it was bad for me and I could die. Mind you, I was an hyperactive kid at the time. At one point I got a genius idea. I lived with my mother and my father would pick me up every weekend. My plan was Friday evening when my father would pick me up, I would tell him mom gave me Coca-Cola cause she said it's okay, you're going to your father's anyway, and at this moment my father accepted the fake challenge I have given him. The next Sunday evening my father gave me like a 1L of 7-Up just before dropping me off. So I was pretty excited. My mother asked me like, what's up with you? And I told her pretty much the same thing. Dad gave me 7-Up cause he said it's okay, you're going to your mother afterward anyway, and then my mom took on the challenge too. They never spoke about it out loud, it was kind of a war and I was the instruments. What they didn't know was that I was the evil mind behind it all. So all in all, I got my revenge. I got carbonated soft drinks and they never learned the truth until I told them years later. My narcissistic abuser mother made up a story so real I believed as a kid. She said people have kids to save them to eat when the apocalypse comes, whether nuclear war or some other apocalypse type. She made a highly detailed story saying kids were just food stocks, that I was to be eaten first, even though I was the skinniest and tallest and basically just skin and bones, and I was the scapegoat, most hated and blamed on for everyone else's misery. And she said, why do you think I feed you all that yummy food? I'm growing you up nice and fat so when the apocalypse comes you'll all be eaten. There was 3 of us kids, but she also explained the cruel, yeah, it was really fricked up and I actually believed it. She used this as a way to control us kids, saying if we didn't do what she said we'd be killed and eaten early. I was her punching bag and she physically and emotionally abused me in ways that a child should never have to suffer. Her master manipulative ways and gaslighting was some of the most disturbing crap I've seen a parent do. I'm free now and am thriving. She also controlled my finances for a long time and I finally have my own money career I wanted and I'm very happy. My mum told me that she found me in the chicken aisle at Sainsbury's, in amongst the chickens, and decided to take me home. Plot twist, she actually found you among the chicken. Kinda a funny one. I grew up on a farm with cattle and we had 2 dogs. I had really bad allergies growing up and was allergic to everything with a fur coat, but I still hugged our dogs and kept getting sick over it. So to prevent from hugging or playing with our dogs, my mom told me that by doing so would make them want to chase cows and getting our cows worked up was a no-no. So I stopped hugging with the dogs in order to make them stop chasing cows. Funny thing is that now when I bring that up, my mom doesn't even remember telling me that. I came home and my dog was missing. I searched for her for weeks. I was 10 so I couldn't really go anywhere to see if she'd been turned in. I called vets offices and stuff though. In my 20s I found out my mom took her to the Humane Society and dropped her off. I hope she found a new family that loved her the way she deserved to be loved. I hope that she didn't wait for us to come get her every day, crying for me. My mom has a dog now that she adores and the thought has crossed my mind to take her and drop her off at the local Humane Society and let my mom know how it freaking feels, but I could never do that to another person. Holy crap. If I were you I wouldn't actually take her dog to the Humane Society, but I would take the dog somewhere else and tell her I did, just to let her feel that feeling for a few minutes, then bring the dog back. My mom has severe bipolar disorder. She once told me she would never yell at me again after a huge meltdown when I was very young, like 5 or 6. I thought of that every time she ever yelled after that my whole life, which was at least every other day. It's just one of those things from childhood that always stuck with me. Any Asian knows the bull their parents or grandparents say to get them to stop doing something. They say you'll either die or get cancer. When I was a young teenager and anticipating my first period, my grandma told me to never sit on the toilet for too long while on your period, because you'll get a blood clot and die. I later found out she just didn't want me sitting on the toilet with my phone. I don't know why she didn't just say that. And no, blood clots from your period will not kill you. My mom told me that when she was a kid my grandma told her that she was gonna die countless times for doing something that was completely fine. Good old Chinese guilt. Bonus story. My grandma hates the internet and computers, and sees it as a gateway to pee and child molesters. I mean, she's got a point, but she hated it to a point where she thought people used it for those purposes only. She's very out of touch with the world. When I was 13 my dad got me my first laptop, and I brought it to my grandma's house to do an essay for school. The second she saw the computer, she said to me right in front of company she had over, "Don't watch pee. That pee is bad. Thanks Nana." Now everyone thinks I was gonna watch pee. SMH. So embarrassing. Or they say you're gonna kill them. Like if you sit on the cold ground or drink ice water, they will die. Not really messed up, but I was told that watermelon seeds would grow inside me and sprout out of my head if I swallowed them. Needless to say, I cried until I threw up when I accidentally swallowed watermelon seeds. The way my grandparents told it, one of them told me the same thing. So I ate a few seeds, drank some water, ate some dirt, and then stood in the yard facing the sun with my mouth open, trying to get them to grow. I like watermelon. I was all of maybe 9 years old, but I was responsible for getting my younger sister up, ready and out the door for school in the morning. Maybe once a month, in a rush I would forget to set the alarm. Apparently this bothered my mom enough that she unexpectedly picked me up from school early one day. She told me that because I had forgotten to lock the door, the house had been robbed and all of our TVs and game systems had been stolen. She led me into my room, which for some reason was the only room in the house that had been trashed. She went on and on about how it was entirely my fault. I deserved this. How I was going to be working to pay off every stolen thing. After a few hours she let up that it was all just a setup to teach me not to forget set the alarm. She hid the electronics and trashed a 9-year-old's room to make a point. Anyways, I have severe general anxiety now. My parents decided to tell me that Santa's elves were actually kids that saw him. They showed me a picture of a semi-creepy Santa and said this is why we don't want you looking for him. Yeah, thank you so freaking much mom. I totally didn't have nightmares and now I'm paranoid that a fat man with fangs and bloodshot eyes is gonna frickin' take me cause I saw him. I'll start off with 1. You have extra teeth because you are related to the Donner Party. 2. There is no more strawberry milk ever. They killed all the pink cows. That's where strawberry milk comes from obviously. To make the milk that I drank and now they are dead. 3. All the oil stains on the road were kids that didn't look both ways. These are so weird. You were a toilet seat baby. Accidents happen. Dad. Truth is, my dad was homeless and he met my mom at an Alice Cooper concert. They ended up banging in a tent. And that's where I was conceived. In a tent. At an Alice Cooper concert. Then, 9 months later, named after a blonde W in a movie called American Pie. My uncle had me terrified to go outside barefoot for years. Apparently if you go outside barefoot the toe gophers will come and eat your toes. I hated wearing shoes as a kid. Still hate it as an adult. The crust of the bread is the most nutritious part. I was just really smart and deserved to be in the gifted kids program. Really I was just dealing with ADHD and I'm not that smart. As an adult related to childhood, you don't have ADHD. You did fine in school. You were just like me when I was little. My mother refuses to see a therapist psychiatrist because she thinks they just tell you what you want to hear. I was diagnosed with ADHD and bipolar at age 29. My life could have been a lot better if she had gotten me the help I needed when I first started having problems, but I was told I was just too smart and unique. How my mom told us, 3 girls, that she was a virgin when she married my father, and that's how us girls should be. That anyone who has sex outside of marriage is a W. You only have sex to have kids and blah blah. She made herself out to be this higher than thou person who was pure and innocent. Wrong. She ran off at 17 and married her boyfriend. They were married for 6 months then divorced. That's all I know. My mom denied it at first when my older sister confronted her. When sister told her to stop lying, of course sis got a slap in the face. Mom finally admitted it then said they never had sex. So she was a virgin when she married our father. Wrong again. She slept over at my dad's house so much people thought they lived together. She never admitted to that. This information was told by several of her own sisters. But my mom was a compulsive liar and a narcissist. More ridiculous than anything else, but my dad told me that if I drank Mountain Dew, I wouldn't be able to have kids. For a solid 3 or 4 days, I was really sad about never having kids, until he finally told me. Funny now, but it really messed me up for those couple days. A bunch of guys in my high school 100% believed this to be the truth and would chug 2 liters in order to make themselves sterile. I told them they were idiots and asked my OB next time I went and she told me they were indeed idiots. They still didn't believe me even after a doctor confirmed. My dad told me I was lucky because no one would ever want me for my looks. Crazy damaging and also led to a lot of confusion in my teenage young adult years when I'd get aggressively hit on by men. Why? Cause actually I'm pretty good looking, I guess. He just decided to tell me otherwise because I resemble his ex-wife, my mother. What the actual frick? When I was about 12, my parents told me my beloved cat was lost. Years later, I found out they gave her away because they didn't want to take her when we moved. I had been so heartbroken over it, combing the woods, putting up signs etc. Her name was Rosie and she was only a couple years old. She'd sleep with me every night. I still can't believe they could be so cruel. It's like my dad witnessed how much my cat meant to me and still something similar happened. It just makes me sick to think about the evil he is. We went to see the moon rise at the beach one evening when I was about 4. My dad told me it was a brand new moon and that the old one had fallen into the ocean. I'm in my 30s now and he still laughs about it. That's a harmless one and it's cute. Well, crap. How much time do you have? These are not in any particular order. 1. Any food eaten before the prayer is over is literal poison and will kill you. I was physically restrained, painfully, to prevent me from testing this. Obvious lie. 2. I do not have rights until I turn 18. 3. Because we caught you looking up pictures of nude women online. Now you're going to burn in heck forever and we can't be together in the afterlife. This is your fault. 4. The reason your mother and I wear this special underwear is that it protects us. There are people who survived fires and stabbings because of this underwear. 5. If you are in an accident and you have someone else in the car, that person's parents will sue us and we will literally lose everything and be homeless. Therefore you are forbidden to have passengers in your car. 6. The reason there are only right-wing radio hosts on the air is because the liberal ones are run off for being idiots. While they never outright said, sex is illegal, their actions led me to believe it was for most of my childhood. Blocking my view in a movie or show if anything more than a light peck occurred, along with scenes containing violence, really kindled the concept in my mind that it was against the law. I don't talk to my parents much. My dad punched my mom in the face so hard that he broke his hand and her cheekbone. They convinced me and everyone else that I hit her with my baseball bat by accident and he fell off the roof while cleaning the gutters. As I got older I remembered the truth. Oh, this is awful at least 3 ways. I'm sorry. Got caught smoking weed in 8th grade. Dad is the one who caught us. I insisted it was incense. He told us my mother was downstairs in tears crying about how it couldn't be true. Told friends' parents who seemed to take it a lot better than my own parents. I'm late Gen X. This incident is in late heyday of DARE program, which only made kids want to try drugs. Early 90s. Part of me was still thinking what I'm doing is super wrong. I felt terrible about letting down my mom. Turns out my mom was an avid weed smoker in her hippie days, but never said anything about it until I was 30 and living in CA where it's legal. I didn't enjoy it at that point nor do I really enjoy it today. I spent a month on lockdown and the entirety of my next 4 years in high school on parole. Parents would pretend to hug me and sniff me to see if I smelled. If I had a bad soccer or hockey game, it's cause I was high. Teacher accidentally marked me absent from class. It's cause I was getting high. Got a bad grade in a class. You guessed it. Cause I was getting high. When that Afro Man song came out, I was in college so no longer lived with parents but it spoke to me in the weirdest way. Felt like how my parents were always judging me. Only reason I didn't learn the truth earlier was because I was afraid to bring it up and any shortcoming on my part would make my parents think it's cause I was getting stoned instead of trying as hard as I can at life. All of that was a lie my parents used to guilt and scare me into conformity and obedience. When I was about 3 or 4 and my sister was 6 or 7 my parents got us each a pet rabbit. One day my mom took us to the store to get stuff for dinner. While we were gone there must have been a thunderstorm and it knocked our rabbit hutch over and our rabbits escaped. Even though it was bright and sunny, we were dumb but kids I guess. We searched the yard for Peter and Thumper and couldn't find them. That night we had chicken for dinner. When my sister and I were teenagers my mom told us the truth. We ate them. What is the most elaborate lie you have ever told? Shared this many times. Seems that people get a kick out of it every time. When I was 18 I mentioned to this girl who was a friend at church that I was looking into going into the Peace Corporation. I really was, but had no immediate plans whatsoever. A few days later the pastor came up to me and said how cool it was what I was doing. I had no idea what he was talking about, but I took the kind words and went on my way. Over the next few weeks a few other people said the same thing. I still didn't realize what they were talking about, but still, people were saying nice things, building me up, so I'm taking them. Cut to a month later. I'm in church and the pastor calls me up. This was a small church. He then proceeds to tell the congregation that I was leaving for the Peace Corps within the next few months. I had to make up where I was going, what I was doing, basically everything. It ended with the pastor and the elders coming on stage and praying over me. May God forgive me. Weeks go on with no word of me leaving from anyone. I think it may have just blown over and I'll make an excuse one day to people as to why I didn't go. That is until I get to church one Wednesday afternoon and as I walk into the door I'm greeted with a surprise. That's right. They threw me a freaking surprise going away party. Long story short, I enjoy the cake, talk about my trip, and end the night. What else am I supposed to do? Lo and behold, 2 weeks later 9/11 happens and I use that as an excuse that my trip got cancelled. You know, terrorism and all, 9/11 sucked, but it really saved my butt. You dodged a bullet there. I didn't intentionally lie, but I am currently too deep in a lie to come clean. My youngest son is biracial. My wife and I are both white. I take my son to a black barbershop to get his cut. They do a much better job of cutting his hair than our local place and I enjoy going there as well. Anyway, one of the barbers there casually said something like, "Well, you would know since you're married to a black woman." Rather than correct him, I just laughed and nodded. I should have just explained the situation and mentioned that my son was adopted, but I didn't. They have made references to me having a black wife a few times now and I don't know how to correct them without it coming off as weird. My son is just under 2, so he won't say anything yet, but he may in the future. Might have to find a new barber. You're in too deep, man, and a good barber is hard to find. You're going to have to get a new wife, a black one. Oh, my best friend and I had a falling out over trivial adolescent BS when I was a teen. So this is what I did. We had the same internet provider, so I called them up and asked to talk to an agent about security, illegal downloads, pornography, what happens if I accidentally download it, etc, and asked for a reference number. I then scanned one of their letters, changed the text to say something along the lines of "We have detected illicit downloads, the reference number of the phone call I made and fill path to his P folder on the family computer." I then printed out the letter, printed the appropriate logos onto a blank envelope, my friend's mother's name and address, went to the post office, said this was placed in my PO box by mistake, and voila, my friend got banned from the PC for at least a year, I think. Pure evil. Post to our pity revenge, please. I was an 18-year-old salon assistant and really wanted the night off of work. So I went into the basement of the salon and pretended to fall down the stairs when I was alone. I did a weak little stumble and then sat on the dirty floor to mess up my pants. Put some Visine in my eyes to simulate tears and then limped in claiming I had a sprained ankle and had to go home. Totally worked too, until a co-worker saw me on the dance floor of a nightclub that night. We had a decorative wicker piece of furniture in our house growing up. It was my mother's and was not sturdy or used for anything other than decoration. One day while my parents were away it disappeared. It was later discovered smashed in the woods behind our house. For years my parents blamed me for breaking it. About 5 or 6 years ago, in my 30s now, I finally confessed at Christmas time that I had a huge party while they were gone and one of the guests got drunk and smashed the thing. That was the lie. I never had the party and to this day I have no idea WTF happened to that piece of furniture. I just got tired of hearing about it at literally every family function. In the last 2 weeks, I've convinced everyone at my workplace that I was born without a sense of smell. Just as a little experiment. I work in a supermarket and just last night we had some off-dog food that stunk. But because everyone thought I didn't have a sense of smell they made me go take it out the back. I picked it up and tried my very best not to show any emotion, but in reality I wanted to cry because of how bad it smelled. Not completely elaborate, but has haunted me. I was 17 and spinning my Jeep around in a patch of wet grass, pulling the emergency brake while going fast, when I hit a rain drain in the middle of a field. It was about a foot high and concrete. I blew out both of my passenger side tires and chipped the aluminium rim. I was in the middle of nowhere, Florida, and had to run a couple miles to a payphone. This was before cell phones were common. I worked myself up into a frenzy before dialing my home. My dad answered and I said I fell asleep at the wheel. He totally bought it, picked me up, and I never was in trouble. He was really supportive and amazing. At the time I felt a bit guilty. It wasn't until a year and a half later when he died that I felt way worse. He had written out a things I remember about my son letter. It recounted his fondest memories throughout my existence. He updated it when he got the terminal diagnosis to include the 90 that his man of a son wasn't too old to need his father's help. I read this after his death and never felt more like a lying bastard. For fun, I once told a kid in school that my family owned the Liberty Bell, because he actually seemed like he might buy it. I kept making up details. They needed money in World War II, and so they sold off shares in various things, and my grandfather bought a bunch. We actually own 51% of it, and now when people pay 50 cents to see it, we get a quarter. True story. It's free to see the Liberty Bell. In high school, my Spanish 3 final was an interview. I was to talk to a person who was raised in a Spanish-speaking country and talk to them in Spanish about their experiences here in America. To give context for why I did this, you should know that I have very bad social anxiety, and at this time in my life I don't think I was on meds for it yet. So since I really don't want to have an hour-long conversation with someone I don't know and visibly start freaking out when I need to have a break from talking to this person, I have to, LOL, completely fake my final project. At this time I remember watching a Draw My Life of a YouTuber I watch who is from El Salvador. Perfect. He doxed himself, I thought. So I fill out the worksheet questions about him with the information I saw and the interview questions with generic crap as well as some of the things he talked about in the video. Next was the hard part. He had to fill out a worksheet, in Spanish, about how well I did. Knowing teachers can read handwriting, and this guy I'm interviewing moved to America when he was 7. I fill out his part of the paper with my left hand and said sorry for the not so perfect Spanish, and that he mainly uses English in his daily life. My lie was a success. The teacher was never suspicious, and I never had to take a foreign language class ever again. Note, sorry for the probably bad formatting. I'm on mobile. Brilliant. The left-handed sorry for bad Spanish was great. I know a lot of non-native English speakers usually say sorry for bad English, so this was very good. 25 years this monster is still following me. Junior year in high school I was out at night with my 4 best friends. Tom, Chris, Oscar and Jeff. Names have been changed to protect me. We were all in Chris' car and stopped for a bite, but before I went and I ditched around the back of the building to pee. As I am peeing I look down and see a extremely gay all black men pee magazine. I pick up the magazine and run to Chris' car and stash it in the glove compartment. Fast forward to about 1 week later and Chris is picking me up to go wherever, and when I get in he is absolutely enraged. I ask what's up and he explains that he and Jeff is the guy in the group that will ride you for any misstep you may have done. Were driving and Jeff was fiddling in the car as they were driving and opened the glove to have a freaking queer mag falls out and Jeff reacts as if it were a dead baby landing on your lap. All the justified denials Chris is throwing at Jeff are falling on deaf ears as Jeff now has found this damning evidence and there is no changing his mind. I had really forgotten what I had done and immediately went into man, that's messed up. Who the heck would do that? There is no way I can tell Chris, red-headed Scottish temper, as 1. He will literally whip my butt, and 2. He will do it again. So this is now the news in the group and is spreading throughout the social circles in school. Chris has now turned into a CSI investigator and was literally retracing everyone's steps in and round that time frame. But he was never really connecting me. I was in fairness also giving him false leads and fake whodunits just enough that they were feasible suspects. This has and will be Chris' greatest scandal, as it is still talked about at least twice a year. Just brought up in front of wives at our 25th reunion. Yikes. Chris has sworn that he will show no mercy on the culprit. One night in a drunken stupor came within a millimeter of spilling the beans, but in a moment of clarity I went back to my original theory that his was Tom. Tom needs to pay for this crime and sooner or later I am going to find the evidence for Chris. Now I know how DB Cooper or the Zodiac Killer must feel with constant over-the-shoulder lifestyle. Pray for me or Tom, whoever gets it first. Go find another gay black dude's magazine and during the next event where everyone is attending, stash it in his car. Let the cycle begin again. My girlfriend is laboring under the misapprehension that I'm a normal functioning member of the human race. So probably that. Greeting fellow humans. I too am a normal functioning member of the robot human race. I got a new job last year and I really needed Halloween weekend off in order to go to a music festival. I told them that every year, the family goes to Mexico to celebrate Dia de los Muertos. They gave me the time off, but when I came back to work, they asked to see photos. A good thing the music festival was located in a very rural area, so I showed them actual photos from the music festival and they thought it was all in Mexico. All my managers were American, so they really had no idea what in the heck I was talking about. Not sure how elaborate this is, but when my son was 8, we moved from out in the middle of nowhere with no television into town with cable. When he first encountered a TV show that was rated TVMA, he asked me what that meant. I told him that it meant you had to ask your ma if it was okay to watch it, and remarkably, he believed it for a while. Haha, I mean, you aren't wrong. When I was in elementary, I was put on medication for adult, no clue what it was called, little pink pills, and they made me feel horrible and lose a ton of weight. My stepdad was very strict about me taking them. So much that if I twitched my leg or was talking too much, he would promptly say, "Did you take your pill this morning?" I finally got fed up of taking them, and so when he would hand it to me in the morning to take, I would act like I took it but actually drop in the cup of water and then drop the pill behind the stove after he walked away. All was good and well until we had to get a new stove after a year of me stashing my pills. I just remember freaking out the entire day knowing at some point they was gonna have to pull the stove out. Asterisk that enter Zoom. When my niece was around 8 years old or so, my husband and I told her an elaborate lie about eggnog. Niece, what is eggnog made out of? Snarky grown-ups. It's a combination of eggs and nog. Niece, what's nog? Snarky grown-ups. Squirrel milk. Niece, what? Squirrels don't make milk. Snarky grown-ups. Of course they do. Anything with a nipple can make milk. Niece, really? I dunno about that. Snarky grown-ups. Yeah, but the problem is that it's really hard to harvest the milk because the squirrels are so small. It takes a really long time to do it. That's why we can only drink eggnog once a year at Christmas time. It takes all year long to milk enough squirrels to get enough for eggnog. That last line was what got her. Made so much sense. My husband also convinced her one time that bike tires have poisonous gas inside them. So if you crash your bike, you better jump up and run away real quick before the bike tire poison leaks out and gets you. Niece's mom found out about that one real quick. My niece is a teenager now and has thankfully chosen to look on these incidents with much humor. She's awesome. Over the past year, I have been slowly convincing my cousin that my girlfriend is a practicing pagan. Gave him little totems we found at a flea market. Made up a backstory for each one and how they will bring him in a piece, which he keeps on his dresser. Before he left for college, I gave him a little vial of fruit juice that was a good luck potion that he sips before his football games. He likes to brag to other people about the things we get him. I wonder how sick he's going to get from that old fruit juice. When I was growing up in the mid to late 90s, Paul Frank monkeys were just becoming popular and were everywhere in school. Everyone had those dinky little notebooks and all sorts of memorabilia. I personally cannot stand monkeys. Animated or real, doesn't matter which. I think it's an uncanny valley thing to me. The way they move and their faces and hands have always put me off. I don't care if other people like monkeys. Nor do I particularly care that monkeys exist elsewhere, but I quickly learned that my opinion was a fairly unpopular one around kids my age. The obvious step was to come up with a justifiable reason for my hatred. The story went like this. When I was little, my kindergarten class went on a field trip to the zoo. This was before they had the glass separating the animals from the people. I had $1 and some pennies and I was going to use the press machine and the gift shop to make a souvenir penny. On our way, we saw the monkey exhibit and I put my hands between the bars, while still holding the $1, to watch them. One of the monkeys spotted me and came over to look at me, and I wanted to pet it, but it suddenly lunged forward with this horrible look in its eyes and bit me and I dropped my $1. Then I had to go get a rabies shot in the butt and I never got my $1 back or my souvenir penny, because monkeys are evil and they ruin everything. And that's why I don't want any Paul Frank crap for my birthday. Grace. Follow up. Last year I was on a Christmas Skype call with my family and my brother brought the monkey story up, which I had always been careful not to tell my mum because she would call me on my crap. After a good 15-year streak of sympathetic "oh my god, no wonder you don't like monkeys" wow reactions, I had to own up to the lie. It lived a long life. TLDR. I don't want Paul Frank merchandise, because an imaginary monkey bit me and stole my $1 and ruined my field trip. I thought I was the only one who didn't like monkeys. I've lived my whole life thinking there was nobody else. But seriously, you're completely right. They're similar enough to humans that it's creepy, but they're also animals. TLDR. I come from a family of criminals, many of which are presently incarcerated, and have to habitually come up with elaborate, partly true, lies for my boyfriend's ridiculously nice family. I don't remember most of what I've told them anymore. I come from a very dysfunctional family with an extensive criminal background, many members presently incarcerated. My long-term boyfriend's family is ridiculously nice and normal, and always ask about how my insert family member here is doing whenever we meet up. Anyways, I am not at all like my family and didn't want them to think less of me, so I've made up a number of backstories about what so and so was presently up to, even though I talk to them once in a blue moon. The only one that's become super problematic is my brother. He's serving time in max security. When they asked about him, I lied and said he was welding, which he did before going to prison, but had just relocated to the location of the prison for a change. Then he was transferred. He is a pretty violent fellow, so when they asked again it was, oh, he's doing okay. He's just moved his business onto location of new prison. But then the plot thickens. They ask questions about what's going on in his life, how often he gets to see his kids with the move. He recently had split up with my terror of a sister-in-law, and how their new kitten was doing. Well, he was recently slashed up with a razor at the new place. He hasn't seen his kids in years, and my ex-sister-in-law let the kitten out to roam freely and it was run over by a car. I don't remember what I've told them anymore, including where he was at last we spoke, as he was transferred again, so it's really hard keeping up with the lies. I know I'm going to slip up one day. What's worse is I had my last name legally changed in university, as I know it would haunt me post-grad. I'm going for my MD, and they recently discovered that I don't share a last name with my parents. Thank you Christmas cards. I was caught off guard when they asked me about it. Pretty sure I told them it was because my new name sounded nicer, so I've now joined the ranks of Ringo Starr, I guess. My girlfriend's family is super nice, and when my dad was addicted to drugs and later when he went to prison, I wanted to come up with a lie just like you did. Instead, I opted with the truth and they were totally accepting and offered to help me with whatever I needed. The mom ended up helping me graduate high school a year early and has us over for dinner almost every night. I told my girlfriend, her mother and several of our friends that Roger Federer bathed in alpine milk as it helped him recover from injuries. They believed this for over a year until I cracked and told them the truth. It seems they had even told other people this lie, one of whom even tweeted him to ask for the truth. I don't remember how this got started, but we have convinced nearly every that we know that my brother is adopted. He definitely isn't adopted and we look similar. The entire family is in on it. Everyone always says no, he's not adopted, and I'll tell them just go ask our mother, and she just plays along. It got to the point where when he switched from middle school to high school, everyone in his class just believed it, and after a while the entire school just accepted it. It was a small high school. Everybody knew everybody else, but it gets better. It has gone so far that some of our extended family now believes that he is adopted. My aunt was at his birth, but we convinced her that he is adopted. That I'm confident, outgoing and care about a lot of things. I don't. Given the chance, I'd rather build a cave and read books all day. Be yourself. Free yourself. Build that cave. I was going away with my friends by a train 2 summers ago. In our country it's pretty common that railway stations have an old train wagon on display outside. So when I saw it, I started this joke with my friend how my father, his father and his father all used to drive trains. Now, she knew I was kidding and she went along with it, acting all surprised and asking me all these questions about trains. But this old man that was sitting behind us overheard and all excitingly started telling how he used to drive trains and all that. I still went along with it because I found it funny, but the enthusiasm that man had about trains was really adorable. In 2nd grade my mom and I moved from one state to another. I would send letters to my old classmates and they would write me back. I told them that my dad, a rancher, had bought me a horse. I don't remember what I named this fictional horse, but I sent multiple letters with drawings of me riding the horse. One day, I don't know why, but I felt really guilty about it and broke down and told my mom that I had been lying to my old classmates. She had no idea I had invented a pet horse and I think she was just amused. I don't remember being punished for it. My brother works at a restaurant with high tourist traffic in Orlando. He likes to tell all the customers he's from Arlen, Texas. Arlen is an amalgamation of Richardson and Garland. Have briefly lived in both. I can say they should just drop the G already. Tagged B on the side of our own house at age 8 with a can of spray paint I found lying around. I denied knowing anything about it at the time, and my father eventually came to the loose conclusion it was one of the neighborhood kids. I held on to that lie for at least 10 years and finally told my dad a month or two ago. The paint is too faded to be legible by now, but it just makes me smile whenever I walk past that particular wall. I break into Tiffany's at midnight. Do I go for the vault? No, I go for the chandelier. It's priceless. As I'm taking it down, a woman catches me. She tells me to stop. It's her father's business. She's Tiffany. I say no. We make love all night. In the morning the cops come and I escape in one of their uniforms. I tell her to meet me in Mexico, but I go to Canada. I don't trust her. Besides, I like the cold. 30 years later, I get a postcard. I have a son and he's the chief of police. This is where the story gets interesting. I tell Tiffany to meet me in Paris, by the Trocadero. She's been waiting for me all these years. She's never taken another lover. I don't care. I don't show up. I go to Berlin. That's where I stashed the chandelier. I had someone tell me a 10-minute story of how they didn't speak a word of anything until 3rd grade but learned read and write before that. In 3rd grade this person walked up in front of the class and said, "I am now competently speaking the English language." This was told to me seriously and with a straight face as if it actually happened. When I was about 11 I lied to my family and friends and then the police and the school that some psycho had tried to get me into his car. I got such a buzz from it that I lied that he'd waited for me on my evening paper round and swung at me with a knife or screwdriver. I ended up having cops tail me on the round once or twice. I had to go class to class in school to tell the story to make sure the other kids were vigilant for the made-up child catcher. I must have frightened the wits out of my poor parents. I've never come clean about it. 30 years later. I convinced my co-workers I had a biological African American sister and it was because both my mother and father had African American heritage even though we are all pretty white. I made up a whole bit about how it was a recessive gene and that she just happened to be dark skinned. My real sister is white as snow, so I convinced a friend from college to take a few brother-sister photos including one in my high school graduation robes to really sell it. Well, my dad decided to come into the store where I worked and one of my co-workers immediately asked him about it, demanding to know if she was adopted. My dad looked at me and knew what I had done and decided to roll with it for me and began berating my co-worker ruthlessly and got the manager involved and ended up leaving with a shotgun for 50% off. Right now I am helping clean out my friend's apartment. She got evicted and has to move to another state. Her apartment is a mess and 3/4 of the stuff in there has to go to Goodwill or the trash. 2 other friends and I are packing, sorting, and throwing stuff out. Occasionally my friend calls to ask where such and such an object is. We managed to pack all the valuables and sentimental stuff, but most everything else is gone. If she asks about something that we've tossed or given away, we all pretend like we haven't seen it. It may be cruel, but she doesn't have a lot of options and this is for her own good as her apartment looks like one of those places off of Hoarders. You're being a good friend. Back in the day when I was a young and foolish lad, my girlfriend and I wanted some uninterrupted alone time. But I was heading out of state for the start of the fall semester soon. So we came up with a story that I was leaving on a Thursday afternoon to avoid the crush of traffic that would occur with all the kids moving into the dorms over the weekend. In reality, we booked a local motel room from Thursday to Sunday morning. I was going to actually leave after our fun time but call my parents Thursday night saying I had arrived at school safely. So the time came and I called them and told them I was there and safe and sound checked into my room. Which in some way was a truth, but not the truth. My girlfriend and I then proceeded to have an interesting couple of days to our own. Sunday afternoon came and as planned, I departed for school from the motel. What was not planned was the fact that my car decided to break down about halfway there. I was stuck in the middle of the next state over about 4 hours from my destination, and about 4 hours from home. It was quite the awkward phone call I had to make home. My dad had to take his truck and rent a tow bar to get my car down to a garage that was near the dorms. We rode in silence for about 2.5 hours until we stopped at a rest area for gas and food. When we were walking back to the truck, he stopped and turned to me to say, "I have no idea how you thought you could get away with this little escapade of yours considering how poorly maintained your car is. I just want you to know that I am more disappointed in you for that than the fact that you lied to us about when you were leaving and the whole motel thing. But for 3 quarts of oil you would have gotten away with it." He then proceeded to beat the living crap out of me with a set of jumper cables right there in the parking lot. Ever since that day, I have always kept the fluids in my cars topped up and checked regularly. Yes, he's back, freaking awesome champ. First to spot a Urajersiman 010 in the wild. When I was young there was always that kid who owned a Nintendo 65 or knew Tomb Raider new cheats. What blatant lies were told to you by that kid? My friend had a pet tiger, but it gets messy, so it had to live in the shed and no one was allowed in the shed to see the tiger. And he had a leprechaun that lived in the tree, but it wouldn't stick around for cameras, so everyone had to just say they saw it. Back in middle school there was a guy I went to school with who would tell us all the crazy stories about a friend named Turk. He would tell us how Turk was a gang member, how they stole cars and smoked weed on the weekends, got in fights, etc. He told us that he lost his virginity to Turk's girlfriend when we were in the 6th grade. Lots of stories like that, which no one believed. Most of the stories were pretty funny. Actually, I liked hearing him tell them even if I knew he was making them up. In 8th grade Turk died and he stopped telling us stories about him. R.I.P. Turk. Him. At my old karate dojo, they taught us to throw fireballs. Me. Oh, and why the frick would you leave that dojo? It burned down. That he was the goalie of a traveling hockey team and he was already being scouted by the Blackhawks. Kid was age 13 and obese, barely able to run for a minute without stopping. That same kid said he took his BB gun out on the weekends and looked for kids wearing Reebok pump sneakers and he would hide in the bushes and shoot their pumps so that the air pouches inside would explode. That very same kid told us he was in a laser tag league and that he knew of all kinds of secret passages and trapdoors in the local laser tag place. He said there's a trapdoor that you can open and get a laser bazooka if you knew where to find it. That very same kid. What a coincidence, right? Also told us that his family was friends with all of the richest families in Chicago and that he could get free cars, candy, McDonald's, basically whatever he wants. Whenever a new video game was coming out he would claim to have already played it and beaten it because he gets all the games before they come out. I never met anyone in school who actually ever saw that kid's real house or how he lived. In high school he got really into drag racing and killed a kid when he slammed into a family's minivan when he was drag racing one of his friends on a street after midnight. That story ended up being true. Frick that guy. Another kid said he saved a kid from a car accident but the car fell on him and broke both his arms. This was after he was absent from school for 3 weeks and then came back with 2 broken arms. It turns out he was waiting for the school bus and he was freestyle dancing. This was in the year of hammer time, in the street and he got hit by a car. I work with a guy like that now. It's ridiculous. This 35-year-old man who has the exact same salary that I do claims to have a multi-story car garage in Iowa with 35-41 cars depending on the story that day. Perpetual sentence finished and one upper as well. Drives me crazy even though it is largely harmless. This guy and I are in the military together, so I can pull his records and see pretty detailed info on his past activities. Here are some more since this picked up steam. Went to Africa to help clear landmines. Graduated from Texas A&M. Has a computer with multiple sound cards. Owns a successful landscaping business he is considering trading for a McDonald's and maybe a Wendy's. Has over 15,000 acres of farmland in Iowa. Whoa, what the frick? It's just sad that he'd lie about that at 35. Besides, I have a 5 million car garage in space. When I was 8 I desperately wanted a Walkman with all my heart. That kid not only had one, but then said he had 5 of them and would bring in 2 of his spares to school on Monday, one for me and one for my brother. No matter how often my mum said not to believe him I was convinced I'd get a Walkman first thing Monday. I even took one of my older brother's MJ tapes to school. When I asked him if he brought it, He shrugged and said he gave them to his cousins. What a dong. This happened with me, but it was with N. He says he had like 5 of them and offered to sell them to me for really cheap. Then, when I finally got to see one, it was really old and he wasn't actually selling it. On the topic of video games, this one kid said that he was flown in by helicopter by Nintendo Power, the magazine, to test out some really cool video games that the general public would never see. Other lies told by this kid. He got married to a princess in Japan, and to get to the island from the States, they stuffed him into a giant cannon and shot him over there. He could absorb electricity through a telephone pole and shoot it out of his fingertips, like Raiden from Mortal Kombat. I said I could run a mile in 7 minutes. Determined to sound better than me, my neighbor said he could run a mile in 6 minutes and 74 seconds. Maybe he was making a joke. There was a girl in high school who was a constant liar. She always made up these dramatic stories about herself to get attention. The worst lie she ever told was that she had cancer, garnered a whole bunch of sympathy from everyone in our school, and then magically, one day, poof, no more cancer. When we asked her about it, she would say that she got a shot that cured it. What a bee, has the cure for cancer and then doesn't share it with everyone else. A buddy's uncle apparently worked for Nintendo and got him like 7 copies of GoldenEye before it even came out. I have no idea why he would lie about that. In 2005 while playing Halo. Surely you mean 007 copies. My dad is a spy. He can get me motorbikes made of lava. Do you want one? Oh, and guns too. Do you want any guns? He was an English accountant. By day, that is. I was once that kid. There was a little bragging crap talking about how he had the latest Mario while we were in preschool. I told him I had Mario 33 just to frick with him. He believed me and was so spoiled that he pitched a huge fit because someone had something better than him. His mom came to pick him up and he was in full tantrum mode. The teacher and his mom kept telling him it wasn't true, but I wouldn't back down. They had to wait until my mom showed to try to get her to make me tell the truth. She supported my fricking with the little crap. My dad approves. Back when I played Pokemon Silver, I was stuck on a certain part. There was a guy blocking the door, blocking the Mahogany Town gym, and I had no idea how to get him out of the way. The kid who lived next door to me told me to release the red Gyarados I caught at the Mahogany Lake, and the guy would move out of the way. I did, and of course, nothing happened. That was the only Gyarados of its kind in the game, and the only way to get it back would be to start a new game. I stopped talking to him. He moved away a year later. I hope he's dead in a ditch somewhere. Hahaha, have I got the kid for you. My buddy, let's call him David, was this kid, and on a number of occasions he was always telling us about these revolutionary new things he had or could do. 1. He was part of the triads on a trip to China. 2. He discovered a city of pure gold underneath Hong Kong. 3. He was given a PlayStation 9 that took multiple games and morphed them into one super game. 4. He could flick pennies into trees and run up them. 5. While playing WoW he discovered gear that had plus 9,000 stats on them right after Burning Crusade was released, but the admins came and took them from him because they were glitched items. 6. On a trip to Europe he met some DJs and got to go on tour with them to some of the big major clubs and DJ with them. These are just a few off the top of my head. I'll try and think of some more. This one kid came to school, elementary, bragging about how he got this awesome Optimus Prime toy, the big one, like 1 foot long in truck form with a trailer. He said he paid like $30. I was like, holy crap, I have $30. So, I beg my parents to take me to the toy store, and finally we go. There it is, Optimus Prime, $100. Da fuck? I was so sad. I asked him about it the next day, and he's like, oh, yeah, my parents paid the rest. Frick you, butthole. I had that one some dickface stole it from me in elementary school. My parents were pretty broke, so it was amazing that I had it in the first place. It was actually the only dang transformer I had. I still wanna find that guy and break his kneecaps. My friend always said that his father worked for AT&T, so he got all of the iPods free. He also said that his dad worked at Blizzard, the FB, the Marines, and was a former astronaut. His dad worked at McDonald's. This one is actually sad. Dang. Sad for the kid, not the father. If you go to the space center in Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire and talk to the guy who is counting off rockets, when he reaches 1100 you can go to the moon and catch Deoxys. The internal battery would always die before then, but my emerald is still counting and is nearing 400 after nearly 8 years. We'll finally find out around 2025. Oh man, two come to mind, both from the same friend. First, when Six Flags was first opening Batman the Ride, or something like that, he told me that he had gotten to go on it. What he described was essentially a haunted house type situation, except you were stuck in there for days. Me being the gullible little idiot I am, believed it, despite having thoughts like, is that even allowable? The other one was slightly more subtle. He claimed he had a friend who was in the movie Hook. He would point out this one kid on the screen at various points in the movie and claimed that was him. He made up stories that he had heard from his friend, like how all he ate on set was the frosting served during the meal scenes and crap like that. By the way, if you're referring to the Batman roller coaster at Six Flags over Texas, it is an awesome roller coaster, albeit less than a minute long. That kid was my cousin, and he claimed he had beaten Battletoads for the Nintendo. This was obviously a lie. No one has ever beaten that game. When people mention the most difficult video games, I always bring up Battletoads. It is impossible. This one's a lie I told. Growing up we had a computer with Windows 95. It was starting to get a little old and I wanted a new one. So I told my dad that we need a new computer because I really want this new game that's only for Windows 96. My dad works in IT, so he just laughed at me, but it almost worked on my mom. That his rich cousin had a car that he could drive using a PlayStation controller as the steering wheel because he qualified through some simulation and it was then legal. I was about 7 or so at the time and it was pretty hard for me to believe, but I couldn't disprove it. I too have seen MIB 2. I worked with children for a while a few years back. It was an after school program where we would just supervise them and keep them busy until their parents showed up. A group of 8-10-year-old kids were sitting around talking to me about video games and were all amazed to hear about the adult games I played that their parents wouldn't let them play. I was talking about Gears of War, leaving out the gory bits of course, and one kid started insisting that he played it all the time on his Wii. He was really arrogant about it and was talking to me like I was an idiot. I maintained my composure and didn't call him out, but in my head I was screaming, "You sit on a throne of lies, you little piece of crap." Yeah, I didn't work with kids for very long. When I was younger I remember we went to the movies, and there was an older guy, maybe 18, wearing a flame shirt and had greasy hair, was ranting about the PlayStation 3 that he had in Japan because it was out over there already. This was when PS2 was still new. This guy was saying the graphics were way more amazing, and they had more Metal Gear Solid games out for it and whatnot. I never believed him. He's a Redditor now. I actually kinda was that kid at one point. I don't know where it came from and I've never really done anything similar again because I cringe pretty hard when I think back on it. Basically, when I was in primary school during PE I would tell my friend that I played basketball in a team. This is because I'd always wear this basketball jersey I had with some made up team on it. I'd say stuff about how I was really good, and when I'd play like crap during PE I'd just brush it off by saying stuff like, "Nah man, I'm not going to put effort in, just playing for fun." But on the flip side, if I pulled something cool off it'd be because I was so pro at basketball. Anyway, this went on for quite a while until one day my mom asks me why my friend's mother called and asked about when to catch my games because they would love to come check one out. I never thought that he would tell anybody else, but in hindsight it makes sense. What reason did he have to doubt I was telling the truth? I think the thing that hit the hardest though was just the look on my mother's face when she explained to me that I shouldn't just make stuff up. The stupid thing is, after all these years, I can't even do a proper basketball shot. I had this same thing, but my story was that I put a pencil in my urethra. Don't know why I told people the story. Don't know why they believed it. Never got disproved. Frick, I feel really weird for that story a decade later. How to catch Mew in Pokemon Red, although I remember seeing a video on YouTube proving something similar to this. I was told that when going on board the SS and to get HM01 cut, If you battled one of the sailors and lost after getting the hum, you would get taken back to the poker center and the SS and wouldn't leave. You would then progress through the game until you got the surf hum. Then go back to the SS and surf behind it and you could push it and you would find new underneath it. My friend had me convinced that Eris didn't die in his playthrough of FFVII. I thought I had done something wrong for the longest time. Yeah, you held down circle, you heartless bastard. My neighbor told me his uncle gave him a special N64 controller with an extra button that enabled characters in Super Smash Bros. To perform what would later be called Final Smashes. His favorite character was Pikachu, and so Pikachu's Final Smash was the best. It greatly resembled what the actual Final Smash would be, a ball of electricity that flies around the stage. My favorite character was Luigi, and the Final Smash he made up for Luigi was crappy, just like the real Final Smash. My friend was kind of an butthole sometimes. Our favorite game of the time for the N64 was Battlezone, Rise of the Black Dogs. Great game, mix of space tank battles between the US and USSR and RTS. Anyway, one of the later levels in the game was about finding alien technology on Europa or some crap. In one of the Soviet missions you could be one of the crazy alien spaceship thingies. Well, my friend told me that you could be any of the alien spaceships by using the special cheat code ABABABABABAB, which was chosen by the developers because they were all old fat guys who wished they had abs. Needless to say, I was pretty miffed when I figured out he was lying. A friend told me that on the path to Empty Moon, if you waited for a certain time, a cave would open. Inside that cave you would find an old man. He would give you a blue book but only in exchange of a red book. How do you get the red book then? You had to talk to someone, don't remember where, and he would give you a red book in exchange of a blue book. When I repeated this instructions to my friend, he replied, yeah, that's right. And that is how I learned the meaning of deadlock. Ugh. I have a really bad one. I felt so dumb. Only excuse is that I was in 4th or 5th grade. This new kid moved into town and bragged that his dad owned a spy store that sold hidden cameras, invisible ink, and with Avao. He had a cool laser pointer that he used to disrupt the teachers and get the class to laugh. One day we found out that our birthdays were remarkably close, and he told me that if I got him a birthday present, he would reciprocate with a laser pointer that could actually cut through things. Naturally, I was stoked. Went to my parents, had them buy some premium Ghirardelli chocolate for my new best friend's birthday, leaving out the detail of what I expected in return. So I give him his gift. He is mildly amused and tells me that he will get the laser to me ASAP. After that he started avoiding me, and I came to the realization that I had been duped. Brandon, I think the kid's name was Brandon, if I ever run into you, I will cut you, despite not having the laser to do it with. Slightly off topic but related, when I was in middle school my mom remarried and I inherited an older stepbrother. He's 4 years older than I, and when I was 11-16 he was just the coolest guy ever. He's the man in pretty much every way possible and generates ridiculous stories everywhere he goes. When I was in high school I'd be the naggy little brother tagging along to his parties, hanging out with his college friends, etc. I was the opposite of cool at the time, but I was still allowed to be sidekick at some of these parties. Like I said, my brother was, and still is, the man. He left home in NH, went to college in Florida, partied constantly with insanely hot women, went semi-pro as a whackboarder, was an amateur boxer with a 2-0 record, got his black belt in TKD, commissioned in the USMC after college, and is now a captain, and is generally just an all-around badass P magnet of a man. He also has a great sense of humor and is always the life of whatever party he goes to. Anyways, I'm done polishing his dong to all of you. You get my point. And yeah, I fully admit that I have a bit of a man crush on him in the sense that I wish I could live his life. I'd go into school with all these stories. Like, oh man, over the weekend we had a party at mom's house and Dana hooked up with 2 chicks in the bathtub at the same time. All my friends thought I was full of crap. I wasn't. He really did those things and I could write a freaking novel of stupid and hilariously awesome things he's done. I remember hearing of a hidden hum in the first gen Pokemon games that would allow you to cut through boundary areas and get to hidden tall grass area, which would allow you to capture all manner of evolved powerful monsters. For instance, That area off to the side of Pallet Town. Ah, yes. The particular rumor in my neighborhood was, you had to talk to your mother 1,000 times, and Professor Oak would come in and tell you to follow him. Then he would give you HM6 to cut through the wall and meet Bill, who would fly you to his garden behind his house where you could catch level 100 Pokemon. When I got a Gamma Cube for my confirmation, kinda like a Christian bar mitzvah except girls are them too. He said he was getting something called a GameCube or GameCube. It was like a Gamma Cube but it could play CDs and all the older Nintendo cartridges. Constant one-upper and a sore loser. There was a planned CD-DVD compatible GameCube made under license by Panasonic. I think it was called the Q-Cube. It was only released in Japan. I think in this case he may have wanted or expected one. I know I did. A high school friend tried to convince everyone that one time he forgot how to breathe and almost died. He also told everyone that he gets free KFC in Wales, only Wales. My friend in 3rd grade told me he had a laptop that would do all his homework for him. When I called him out, he ripped his pants off and fisted his own butt. You silly kids and your drugs. I once asked this sucker why he seemed so popular and he said because his dad was Archie Manning. I said no one was that popular cause of their dad and walked away. A few days later I found out I had asked Peyton Manning why he was so popular. One kid told me that there was a cheat in Harvest Moon, A Wonderful Life, to shoot exploding seeds at bandits with a slingshot. He then told me that you could farm hybrid plants in Wind Waker. He was a very confused kid. This one kid just made up completely fake games that didn't exist that he claimed to have. The one that I remember most was called School Revenge. Everyday school items like pencils were weapons. Teachers were bosses. The principal was the final boss. Sounded so bad, but mine eyes have seen the glory of the closing of the school. We have tortured every teacher. We have broken every rule. We plan to kill the principal tomorrow afternoon. I had this friend who claimed that his mom, who lived 2 states away and remarried to another man, had like a giant mansion and they had like 10 cars there and a boatload of DVD players. Of course, the question becomes, why didn't you move in with your mom instead of living in that shack with your dad? The best lie came when I was getting kind of sick of him, and he said that he had the world's fastest commercial computer, and his proof, he circled an ad from a magazine and showed it to us. We called out his balls on that, and later on when it was brought up again he was like, well, it's not the fastest now. That just sounds sad. I knew a kid in grade school who bragged about how his dad was a doctor and bought him all the American NES games and some Japanese ones too. My mom worked with his mom, and while it's true that his dad was a doctor, it turns out that he'd walked out on them a few years prior and he was now completely absent from their lives. I still feel sorry for that kid. That he smoked so much weed that in middle school he just had to sniff it to get high. Also about how he was always on mushrooms because his brother grew them in his closet. That was until he got suspended for it, then started to blame everyone else. I think he is still living in his parents' basement. A kid told me of a nudality in Mortal Kombat, don't remember which one. Before killing them you could strip them of their clothes. It would have been nice for Katana. I am a native Spanish speaker and was told by my brother that de nada translates to English as de nada, so I was arguing with my English teacher because she said it was you're welcome. A kid back in middle school quickly became notorious for lying, but his very first one was that his dad owned a Corvette with 5 spoilers and he was going to get when he was 16. The one that made people stop talking to him was when he said Fiona Apple was his babysitter when he was 3-4 years old. I remember my friend's brother telling me you could get Grey Fox's sword in Metal Gear Solid. He said you had to beat the ninja boss battle on extreme difficulty while smoking and could not use your gun once. I tried it over and over again. Haha, I reconnected with that kid recently, and he tells me that he's pulling 185 WHP from his Hyundai Accent with a ported and polished engine and an ECU reflash. I chortle heartily at it. When I was 12, my dream guy asked me if I liked Nirvana. I was still into boy bands and dance routines, and said yeah, I like the new stuff. This was in 2001. Reddit. What other embarrassingly obvious lies have you told to seem cooler? I was probably about 10 years old. My friend's older brother asked me if I like Alice Cooper. I wanted to be cool, so I was like, yeah man, shot. They laughed their asses off at me. Yeah, I really enjoy Alice in Chains and Panthera. Not a lie, so much as it was obvious I had no idea what was going on moments. In 6th grade I moved and went into a new school district. Incidentally, the new school system had 3 elementary schools, grades K-5, feeding into 2 different middle schools, grade 6-8, so not a lot of kids knew each other. In one random class we did an exercise where you partner up, interview the person, then present what you learned about them to the class. Young, meek, socially inept and culturally unaware little me was partnered with one of the coolest dudes in the room. I couldn't really explain why he was cool, he was just one of the guys that seemed calm and confident and everyone knew him and liked him. Popular, in a word. So anyway, I was interviewing him, asked his favorite band, and he says Tupac. I wrote it down and moved to the next question. And, while presenting, I go and Andy likes the band Tupac. 'Twas met with giggles, stares and a correction from the teacher. I was not a very cool kid. It's okay, I still do these things. Once when I was 14 my friends asked me if I was up for some MJ. I replied that I'm not really huge fan of Michael Jackson but wouldn't care if they played some. Truth is I hated Michael Jackson. They meant pot. When I was in an elementary school, 4th or 5th grade, I lied about having a waterbed because I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I kept up this lie for months, but one day when half my Cub Scout troop was at my house for a pack meeting they went into my bedroom and exposed me for the fraud I was. I have a similar-ish story. I went to camp when I was younger. I was about 8. I was just a really typical little girl. I wore overalls and pigtails and really wanted to be cool. My friend's elder sister was our gateway to cool music, so I'd bring around burned CDs of Sublime and Blink 182. This is the early 90s. Without having any idea what we were listening to, one of my camp counselors, a boy in his late teens early 20s, was clearly slightly punkish, or at least into music, and dressed how a lot of kids in suburbia did when it was 1996 and they liked alternative bands. I decided he was cool and he needed to like me. One day he had on a shirt that, if you looked at it for a while, had the Smashing Pumpkins logo on it. I only knew of one song by the Smashing Pumpkins, 1979, from listening to radio. It was played maybe every 4 songs or so. It was quite popular. So one day I was walking behind him, reading the lyrics on the back of the shirt. I already know from the front it's Smashing Pumpkins. I'm staring intently and he sees me, so I decide to nod knowingly as if I'm quite absorbed in these lyrics. Clearly over my head, he joked, "You like what you're reading?" and I just go, "Smashing Pumpkins. Yeah, they're cool." He seemed quite surprised and asked his friend if the back of his shirt said the band's name. It didn't. He asked me if I recognized the band just from the lyrics and I said, of course, like the little social climbing swipe I was slowly becoming. He asked me what albums I liked and I crap you not, said the older stuff mostly, not what's on the radio, because that's what my best friend's cool older sister always said about bands. For the rest of the summer he seemed pretty impressed by me, not in a creepy he was too interested in me kind of way, but if I was near the other counselors he'd say I was awesome and that I was his bud. Obviously it felt very, very cool, but I was in constant fear of him asking me more music related questions and I'd have to reveal I didn't know anything. I think that was the same summer I was too scared to go in the pool because I was a bundle of neuroses, so I'd read in a field near the quarry. He also found that rad, as if I was being counterculture. I have been faking coolness for decades. I think you accidentally are cool, gnarly, dude. When I was in daycare, I saw a commercial for a Hot Wheels track set that had a loop, and a badass voice said "IT defies gravity." Later that winter I went sledding with the daycare lady's son and friends. They were older. They built a big jump on the hill and put me on the sled and sent me off. I took off and landed pretty much at the bottom of the hill, then went through a fence and into a little brook. They cleaned me up, terrified, and I sat like a badass. I defied gravity and they laughed their asses off. I had no idea what defy gravity meant at the time. That's absolutely adorable. When I was 5 I told my older cousins that I was actually from the jungle, had a pet tiger and could drink water through my ear. I bet they were so jealous. I swirled a glass of red wine, smelled it and said, wow, you can really smell those tannins. The girl I was out with informed me you can't smell tannins. Back when I was in kindergarten, baggy pants were huge, pun intended. This cool kid that I didn't really know would always wear these awesome black pants with flames up the side. I asked him about them, and he gave a typical cool sounding name for them. After he asked if I had any, I told him my mom was getting me a pair the next day. I avoided him from then on, until my family moved 1,200 miles away later that year. A few years ago I was in Dublin with my family, unhappy with my Eastern European origins. I decided to pretend I was British. I bought a poster from a street vendor. Guy asks me, where you from? London. Nice. I used to live in the city as well. Which borough are you from? I could have given a million plausible answers. Being 16 and a dumbass, I'm like, at the East End. Where exactly? At this point I make my escape to wherever I was going, cringing all the way there. It's one of the few awkward moments in my life that make me physically cringe to this day. I told a girl I liked I smoked cigarettes to show off to her. My mom found this out and did the whole smoke a pack of cigarettes until you're sick punishment, and by god it worked. I mean, I never smoked in the first place, but it worked. And now you have lung cancer. This always stands out in my mind, even though I was a child when I did it. I was on vacation with my family when I was around 9 or 10. I slipped and fell on the pool deck at our hotel. A very nice looking older man helped me up and asked if I was okay. I was so embarrassed, I shouted I did it on purpose and ran away. Just saying, if I were him I probably would assume you meant their later work, not the stuff that has been made very recently. But everyone's their own worst critic, and this was with a crush, so I can see why you'd beat yourself up over it so much. You know your right was previously and released until it came out around that time. That might have worked as well. See, if you always say you like their early stuff before they hit it big, you're always covered and you sound hipster cool, cause they probably haven't heard it. I liked NSYNC when they were underground. When Lost was still on, a girl I liked asked me if I watched it. I said I don't watch it all the time, maybe once a week. I didn't know it only came on once a week. She called me out on it. One time I was talking to some guy at choir practice, and he asked me if I played Pokemon. My brother played Pokemon and Magic the Gathering, but I didn't really know the difference, so I responded with yeah, I think the islands and swamps are really cool looking. He kind of just blank stared for a moment. I was pretty sure I said something wrong, so our conversation consisted of him telling me stuff, and me MHMMing and oh yeah-ing. Thanksgiving when I was 14, my older, cooler cousin and I were hanging out while the adults were drinking wine and getting silly. My cousin pulled out a joint, took a hit and said, "You smoke weed, right?" I said of course, as I took a massive hit and choked. Dinner was served and I was so dang high all I could do is sit and stare. I remember my mom saying, "Why aren't you eating?" I looked over at my cousin and he was laughing his butt off. Jeez. On my 13th Halloween night of my life, my very protective mother let me go out with my friends unsupervised. We met up with some other friends from school who were hanging out with a couple older kids, around 14 or 15. I thought I was cool because I was skateboarding and probably saying the word frick a lot. Well, we ended up at the house the older kids wanted to get to all night, and the lady living there answered the door and said, "Dang, you brought all of these people." My sheltered little self let out, "Oh, it's okay. I don't want any candy." The lady was not worried about giving out candy. It was the blunt in her hand she was worried about passing around to all of us. Was on a date with a young handsome doctor. He told me his family were Persian. I commented, "I don't know much about Persia." "At least you didn't say I don't know much about cats." I used to lie about my favorite color and said it was green cause I'm a tool bag and did whatever it took to fit in. My favorite color is orange. Op, is your name Brooke? If so, PM me. We're the same age, and I recall asking this very same question when I was 12. 2. We had English junior high together. Not really a lie or a line, but embarrassing still. I had a photography class with this girl I had a crush on since elementary school. Our teacher makes us present the pictures to the class, anonymously, so he can get a class grade in his grade. Well, there's a picture of a woman in what appears clothes from the medieval era. So I said aloud, she looks like a gypsy. Turns out it was her mom. I hid in shame for the rest of the year. When you said dream guy, I thought it was like the guys from Inception and Barney Stinson needed them for something legendary. He's got a guy for everything. I was really ashy once and kept scratching my leg on the bus. A kid asked how I had all of those scratches and I told him that my pet tiger always scratched me to wake me up. In about 4th or 5th grade, a new kid joined our class. We had the largest class in K-12 at a whopping 40 kids, so it was kinda a big deal whenever there was a new kid, and he somehow instantly became the cool kid, the one that everyone liked. I was not the cool kid, but, as most children in elementary school, I wanted to be the cool kid, so I observed my enemy, saw he had wrote Aussie on his knuckles, so I did that the next day. He walks by, sees my knuckles, and asks if I liked Aussie. Now, this was before I even knew what the heck Aussie even was, so instead of going all out and saying yeah, I kept it subtle. I said something along the lines of not really, he's alright I guess. 9 years later, he and I are best friends. Weird how that works. In 1st grade I told this kid that I had a machine that could create new Power Rangers movies from blank tapes. He believed me and came over to see it, so I told him that my mom didn't let me show it to people. Flawless. I have the opposite type of story. I told one of my friends, whose mother was babysitting us at the time, that I wanted to be a stripper. I was maybe 10. She of course, like a little bee, runs off to tell her mom. Her mom comes over to talk to me and I tell her of course I want to be a stripper. Digging up dinosaur bone sounds awesome, but I knew what a stripper was. I knew full well it was bad and I shouldn't want to be a stripper, but I never did understand why anyone would want to work a real job when they could just take their clothes off, do a little dance, and come home with hundreds of dollars to spend on candy. I didn't have to play cool. I was cool. I had to lie about being so cool. Of course I want to be a stripper. Digging up dinosaur bone sounds awesome. Really smart save for a 10-year-old. Kudos. This will get buried but here goes. In grade school a friend of mine told me all about how he loved to go on roller coasters. He liked to name all the roller coasters he had been on and all the theme parks across the country he went to. It was his thing. And being naive kids, we were all impressed. In 8th grade there was a carnival at our school, and we went on the Super Roundup together. Basically an open gravitron that tilts. He started sobbing before it even started to tilt and begged the operator to stop the ride. It was then I realized he was a big fat phony and my little mind was blown. Here's a story about jacking off. I was around 10. I would follow my older brother, 14, when he would go hang out with the other boys in the neighborhood, who were about 15 or 16. One of their favorite pastimes was to basically corrupt me, show me playboys etc. One day they were discussing fapping, what they like to use, where they fap, that sort of thing. One neighbor asks me, hey Gokudge, you ever choke the chicken? I figured they would realize I was completely lost as to what they're talking about if I said number. So my 10-year-old self responded, yeah I guess sometimes. They laughed really hard. I didn't know what was happening. I pretend I watch a lot of popular movies, like The Avengers and Don't Kill Me, all the Batman movies. For some I'll just read the plot summary on Wikipedia so I'll understand the references my friends are making. I usually don't care enough to devote a 2.5 hours block of time to watching a movie unless friends are over. The most pop culture I get is from watching movies on international flights. I have bullshitted my way through many conversations about favorite characters and quotes and I'm pretty sure it's glaringly obvious I haven't seen anything : I went into Hot Topic to buy a skirt and was kinda looking around for a top to wear with it when I was accosted with a sales girl. She gave me a Dropkick Murphys top and asked if I liked them and I said yeah I love them and bought the shirt. I had no idea who they were and when I looked them up, decided I really hated them. Still wear the shirt though. Hanging out with a slightly older family friend who I thought was super cool. She asked if I liked Marilyn Manson, to which I said I love her stuff. So good. I still couldn't tell Manson was a guy when she showed me an image of him. When my wife and I first met in college she told me that she was failing math and needed a tutor. I offered to help. She had an A+ in math, and I was failing. Wasn't I Know You're Right released in 2001 on Nirvana's self-titled Best Of? You would have looked like you know your crap. If I didn't do the stutter before, then I could have passed. Okay, is this the day? I went to a private high school in Seattle, and once a year there was a trip in vans to Canyonlands, Utah. We drove down there for about a week of extended hiking and camping, and at night, the students camped in one area and the adults in another, mostly so we could be up and loud in the early evening. So a couple of popular boys said that they were high on a drug called Sparengi. They acted really weird and I wanted to be cool, so I said that I was on it too. I was basically telling everyone in my graduating class that I was high, when pretty much everyone else knew that the drug was made up, and therefore I was standing there, in front of them, pretending, and they all knew it and didn't let on till later. Okay, it gets worse. When we returned to the city, I pointed out the definition of sporangium, a sporing component of mushrooms, and claimed that I thought they were on mushrooms. And then I recanted and said that that wasn't true either. I felt bad taking an out. I heard about that for about a year, until it was silenced by my next incident, in which I came to school with a split lip and, in the retelling, dismissed someone's question about whether they were bigger than I, and thus the word went out that I had been assaulted by a midget. I, an American, was in Australia and hanging with this English girl from Liverpool. A friend put on Get Back by the Beatles and I said to her, "You like this band from your hometown?" She asked who it was and I responded, "The Beatles." To which she responded, "Oh, is it newish?" Needless to say, fabrications. To be fair, that was probably forever ago. Kids listen to funny things these days. A friend in elementary school asked young girl me, "Do you know what RedTube is?" Me, "Yeah, of course." Him, "So what do you think?" So I knew either it was a fun website or a dirty site, so I guessed, "Oh, it's funny." What? When I was 6 I told my friends I was the voice of Ariel in The Little Mermaid, and when they didn't believe that I said, "Okay, fine, but family did have to donate a lot of rocks and shells and stuff to help make the set." Sophomore year I claimed I went on a date when in reality I just went to the movies with my lesbian friend. I'm so ashamed. One time my friend called me up and asked if I wanted to go to Mickey D's with her, and I replied, "Yeah, I need some new CDs anyway." Everything I said up to 16, 50% of what I said up to 20, 25% of what I said up to 24, and so on. Think it's called the law of diminishing bullshitting or something, but I might just be saying that to sound cool. In 5th grade I heard the boy I liked talking about South Park and he mentioned Kenny. I had never seen the show at the time but I wanted to impress him, so I said, "Oh yeah, Kenny. The stuff he says is hilarious." When I was in a primary school I told my classmate about how my mother found an old candy once and ate it. He replied, "Holy crap. She should be mentioned in the Guinness World Records book." I didn't know what it was, so I thought he said something offensive. In order to hurt him back I said something like, "Oh, yeah, well, your mother should be mentioned in Stupid People's book." Then he explained to me what that book was about. I still feel very ashamed about it. When I was 15-16 I went to Hot Topic and was talking to the cashier who I had a huge crush on. We somehow got on the topic of A Clockwork Orange and I really had only read like maybe the first 15 pages of the book, so I just dove in and talked to him as if I knew everything about it. I had no idea what I was talking about and he knew it. To be fair, I can't recall when they released it, but they came out with a compilation of Nirvana bootlegs and unfinished tracks. So they did technically release a new album at one point. Yeah, sure, I'm into ska, Society for Creative Anachronism, fabrications. Not that there's anything wrong with that, I'm just not. He was that attractive. Alright Reddit, time to fess up. What's the biggest lie you've ever told? When I was 7 and in primary school we were in class sat on the floor and the teacher was reading something to us. I was at the back, really bored. I thought it would be funny if I fell asleep, so I lay back and pretended. About 2 minutes later one of the other kids started to laugh and shouted for "Who's fallen asleep?" Some other kids laughed and I thought it was going to be hilarious. The teacher stopped reading and shouted he better not be, otherwise he is in huge trouble. Oh. At this point I decided there were two options: continue to pretend and see where it goes, or wake up and get in trouble. I stayed asleep. Then things got a little crazy. The teacher tried to wake me but I held my ground. She became a little panicked, which made me even more worried to wake up. She called the headmaster. They carried me to the nurse. They called my dad and he came from work. I am still pretending and quietly crapping myself about how I am going to get out of this. Dad turns up. They call an ambulance. This was my cue. I fake waking up. They are relieved but the ambulance still comes. I spend the night in hospital. Feel really bad. I made up a story that I hit my head when playing earlier in the day. TL. DR. 7 years old. Fake being asleep in school. Escalates. Spend a night in hospital. Still feel quite bad. Told my dad I faked it when I was 20. He didn't believe me. This is a great. Kid logic is so devious sometimes. A friend of mine has a running like going with the hairdressers. The first time he went in there they thought he sounded American and asked if he was from there. His brain must have massively trolled him at that point as he replied yes. Now every time he gets his hair cut he has to talk about how much he misses America and how different England is whilst pulling off a terrible accent. It's been like 4 years. He's in too deep. It was my last quarter in college and I failed physics again. Everyone was coming down to see me graduate and have a party for me. I'd been to lots of graduations in my almost 6 years in college, so I knew that they didn't have a big list of names. You handed the announcer a slip of paper with your name on it and they read it into the microphone. Then you get an empty diploma holder and go get your diploma after the ceremony. So the morning of graduation, I went to the auditorium with my cap and gown and found a person who was telling graduates where to sit, etc. and said, OMG. I left my slip of paper at home, OMG. OMG. What can I do? And she just asked me my name, wrote it down and handed me a new slip. I walked across the stage to the cheers of my friends and family, had an awesome graduation party and everyone went home. I moved to another state and the following summer came back, took that class, and really graduated. Didn't go to that ceremony. I told my parents I was thinking about graduate school and wanted to take some classes to see if that's what I should do. Almost 20 years later and they still don't know what happened. I see no reason to tell them, ever. As a professor, I often assist in planning this type of ruse for students failing my class. They honestly appreciate the help. In the 5th grade I thought it would be cool to convince the class that I had nerve damage in my right arm and couldn't feel anything in it. Every time I told someone this they would test it out by jabbing me in the arm with a pencil or pinching me or even outright punching me, and I had to sit there with a straight face to keep up the lie. I was not a bright child. Most painful lie I ever told. They bought it though. I had a super annoying friend David who I saw almost daily in elementary school because our parents were friends and we lived down the block from each other. He was gullible and kind of stupid, and one day on a whim I convinced him that I was running an underground laboratory, a Dexter's laboratory, from my basement, and that I was working on giving us both superpowers. I hyped it up for almost an entire year, sketching out intricate designs and taking notes on exactly how he wanted his superpowers to work. Until one day I broke the news to him that an evil rival scientist destroyed my lab and poor David would just be short and normal forever. I think I'm that David. I told the principal a big story about why I did not do my homework in 2nd grade. I explained that I had a pet alligator that shredded it up while we were playing. Little kid logic said that no one would believe that a dog ate my homework. So I brilliantly deduced that I should use the same story, but say it was an alligator. I was convincing enough that they called my parents. It took my mom about a minute to convince the principal that I had an active imagination and that there was no alligator wrestling going on. We were just wrestling. I faked being stereotypically gay so that I would get bigger tips at a restaurant where I worked. I usually got $150 a night. I don't know about my biggest, but most likely my most elaborate stupid. You know how the school report cards all have a unique font and means of preventing forgery? Nothing like modern currency, but you couldn't just pull up the font on a computer. Well, I was having a rough go of things all around from about junior high on. I think it was 9th grade. and my dad starts asking for the report card for that quarter. Knowing I'm going to get my crap kicked again for crapping out, I managed to find a whole box of old report cards in the library when we were supposed to be doing research for a book report. Score. So me being the resourceful me, grabbed a stack and tucked them away. Next day when we went back to the library, I was prepared. I had my X-Acto knife, some whiteout, scotch tape, and unlimited use of the copy machine. After careful analysis of what I would change to make it seem somewhat legit, I went to work. I had about an hour to make it happen. Having managed to avoid bloody fingerprints on the master from an X-Acto knife, a nosy librarian and teacher or students, I sat back just before the bell rang and admired my handiwork. This would pass under scrutiny. Later on I give it to my dad and sure enough, I'm in the clear. A couple months go by and my dad is going through my room and a few papers fall out of one of my jacket pockets. He opens them up and sees about 4-5 report cards, not mine, that are all hacked up for the individual letters I had used on my altered version. Busted. Funny part is, he just kind of shook his head and smiled but didn't say much. I was expecting the butt whooping of the century. TLDR. Doctored my report card, passed it off but got busted later by my own evidence. Moron. He isn't allowed to say it but he was very proud of you that day. Throwaway for obvious reasons. At work, electronics retail, I was called to work at the register for a while to help the line. I was trained on it, but not very thoroughly, wasn't entirely comfortable with my knowledge of protocols and such, but employer did not care. Got thrown up there anyways whenever they wanted. An older couple came through my lane, probably in their late 50s or early 60s. They were very upbeat and personable, but clearly in a rush. Didn't think too much of it since people are often in a rush around my area. They were buying large sums of gift cards and some other stuff that I don't remember. Kept saying it was their grandkid's birthday and how they were so excited. Total was about $2,500 I think. Seems like a lot but this is a very affluent area so it's not that unusual for someone to drop that much. They split the purchase onto 2 credit cards and I processed their transaction without issue. They went on their way. About a week later, a manager came to me and asked about an unusual purchase that I rang. He told me that any purchase over $200 needed to have it checked and he asked if I checked their IDs. I wasn't aware of that fact but fearing for my job at this point, I told him I did check their IDs and everything matched. Turns out the older couple was using stolen credit cards. I had to make a written statement for the police about everything that happened in the transaction, including putting the lie that I verified IDs. For months after that, I thought they would find out I lied and I would get fired. I felt awful for the people whose cards were stolen and thought they would come in and blame me for it, as they should have, but nothing happened. I remained in good standing with that employer for years. TLDR, I naively enabled credit card fraud and lied to not get fired. Dude, that is not your fault. I used to work for Staples as a technician and they would pull me out to do cashier crap all the time, and then get mad at me that I wasn't able to reach my quota. Retail sucks. And it's not because of people, it's because of the managers. Not mine, but a friend's. My friend is a pretty huge doofus, and is terrified of his parents, even though they are the nicest people I know. Anyways, he graduated and went to college and his parents were so happy for him, and since he's a rich kid they are paying for it too. After a few months he decided he couldn't do it and dropped out. It's been almost a year now and he still hasn't told his parents. He's been coming over our house whenever his parents think he's going to school. Just a few days ago he said he couldn't come over because he had to stay home and fake study for upcoming exams. I have no idea why he's so afraid to tell his parents. His parents are understanding people and he's making it worse by not telling them. I keep asking him what he's going to do if the school calls or I dunno, doesn't freaking graduate. His response is always I'll figure it out when the time comes. It may not have occurred to you but his parents might be the kind of people who put on a happy face for outsiders, but are not actually that nice. I told a girl I was dating that I was getting deployed because I was too big of a wuss to tell her that she was freaking weird and possessive. 2 months later I actually did get deployed. Calm as a bee. I told all my friends in first grade that I was a Mexican princess and that my dad owned a helicopter. I wanted to explain why we didn't have a car. I didn't want to say it was because we didn't have any money to buy a car or a garage to put it in. In the 5th grade my teacher was asking everyone if they were from another country. I wasn't, but on an insane whim I claimed that I was. I'm from Denmark, I said, looking around the room proudly. My teacher raised an eyebrow, but noted it on whatever she was doing and moved on. After that a bunch of kids gathered around me and asked about Denmark. I said I barely remembered it because we moved to America when I was 5. A teacher's aide kind of guy walked up and asked if my parents spoke Danish. I gave him a condescending look and said, "No, they speak Denmarkian." The guy was puzzled, but he was either too shamed by the children's laughter or too kind to call me on it. I suppose I'll never know. The best part happened weeks later, when I told my friend which girl I'd arbitrarily decided I had a crush on. Her friend overheard and rushed to tell her. "Sarah," she said, acting way too excited about the whole thing. "Old Chili has a crush on you." "No, no, no," I said, thinking fast. I said Kara, not Sarah. Kara was the girl in Denmark who I loved. I haven't seen her since we moved here, and I missed her. The kids were skeptical, but I painted such a romantic picture of our love that they didn't stay that way very long. To this day, I have never told anyone in my 5th grade class that I'm not from Denmark. Not a super big deal, but I told my very Catholic mom that I was going to the church for adoration, and in reality I just went to some girl's house for a makeout session. I stand firmly by my decision that night. You are one brave man. I once lied in school that I was related to Elvis. Yep, the Elvis Presley. My proof? I sang "Love Me Tender" as deep as I could. Yet, they didn't believe me. Could have been because I was a little 7-year-old Swedish girl. See, I find this funny, because I read this in an American baritone voice, and as soon as I read little 7-year-old Swedish girl, the voice started changing for each new piece of information. It was like a dude hitting negative puberty and turning into a girl. Girlfriend of 6 years, lived together most of the time, lied to me about her age, said she was a year older than she really was, started with the lie, didn't want to admit it, wrote it out. Weird. When I was around 5 or 6 years old, we would often visit my great-great-grandmother at the nursing home she lived at. She was 106 years old. I didn't know her well and she didn't talk much. Often she would be sleeping. She loved to see me though. Something about the youth made her so happy. I was terrified of her. I didn't understand why she looked so sick and frail, and I thought she smelled bad. I was young and didn't understand. My family asked me to hug and give her a kiss on the cheek or forehead. I feigned trying to do so but pretended I couldn't reach over the crib like guardrails on the side of her bed. I never saw her again. I regret this lie very much. Don't feel guilty, you were very young and shelved you no matter what. I used to go to a Scientology school where they teach you study methods of L. Ron Hubbard, but not the religion, because L. Ron Hubbard was such a sci-fi fan. He believed that the human brain worked like a computer. When you come across a word you don't understand, you malfunction and show signs, such as yawning and not wanting to study. I used to open the dictionary and yawn, give the supervisor a thumbs up. There are not teachers, only supervisors at this school. Everything is self-taught, to pretend I looked up a word. You should do an AMA. I've never heard of a school like that. I once told my dad that the smell in my room was because of the gardener who mowed the lawn and some hot grass clippings got in through the window. Yeah, I was high. He knew. The guy in the truck that just drove past threw a cigarette out the window. When I was 5 or so, my dad and siblings were up shooting in the mountains. I found a book of matches in his trunk and proceeded to light some grass on fire. California in the summer equals very dry. My dad unsuccessfully attempted to put it out with a blanket. I had never seen fire spread so quick. Couple 1,000-acre fire was caused by me and me alone. I still feel terrible about it. I read that as my dad and siblings were shooting up in the mountains and it completely altered my perception of that story. I told my tennis team, all my friends, and my girlfriend that I was going to California for spring break so I wouldn't have to play in 5 days worth of tennis matches and waste my holiday. Picked up golf and met some great new friends, had one of the best mini vacations of my life. That is the whitest lie ever. When I was a senior in high school, I jumped my car, bottomed out and destroyed the oil pan and some other stuff. Told my dad some butthole moved a roadblock sign from a pothole. I owned up recently. I am so ashamed of this story. I was on a cleanse where you only drink lemonade blah blah blah, and I hadn't eaten in 3 days, so you can imagine how grumpy I was. My husband had called me earlier that day to tell me he had to take our car into the shop again and that it was going to cost us another $300. This car had been nothing but trouble since the day we bought it and I was not happy about it. So my mom picks me up from work and takes me to the auto shop and I march into the lobby and start shrieking at the man at the counter, literally at the top of my lungs, F-bombs everywhere and calling him all kinds of names in front of everyone because we just had our car fixed and why is this still an issue? The man is calm and politely asks me to stop yelling at him. At this point I storm off and start crying in my mom's car. She tries to console me but I am hysterical. I realize how pathetic I am being, so I demand she go and tell the man I am pregnant because there is no other excuse for my behavior, as if screaming at a stranger isn't pathetic enough. She reluctantly tells the man, but she is also shamed by my behavior and wants to save face. Then, the unthinkable happens. The man comes out to the car, where I am crying, and he hugs me. He tells me his daughter just had a baby and he knows about the mood swings and that everything will get better. Then he prays for me, pats my head and gives me a discount on my car repairs. I am going to heck. See, this is why we eat food instead of just drinking sugar water. Frick a throwaway. I'm not proud, but I am honest. Last year, my junior year of high school, I broke up with my girlfriend of a year and a half. In teen time, that was forever. We broke up in October, and in November I got a call. Apparently she was pregnant, and I was floored. I was 16. I wasn't ready to have kids. I had a life to lead, especially because she was bonkers. I wasn't a man about it. I avoided her and the potential of fatherhood, and I lied to my parents for literally 3 months. I wanted an abortion. Judge me as you will, and she wanted the kid. At some point, I had to tell them and face their disappointment. Then I got a text mid-December. She had miscarried, and I wasn't going to be a father. She told her friends that I was apparently relieved that it happened, and word found its way back to my mom. She confronted me on New Year's Eve. I told her everything and her only question was, why didn't you tell us? Why lie and say you were fine? I told them I didn't want to disappoint them. My mom told me the only reason I'm disappointed is because you didn't tell us sooner. Moral of the story, I don't lie to them anymore, because they show nothing but support. The entire situation redefined me. It made me grow up and accept responsibility for my actions. You don't value youth until it could be taken away. 3 friends and I told some guys at the flea market that our parents were dead, so they'd let us buy really cool ninja weapons. It ended poorly. I hope nobody got a ninja star in their eye. No, this closeted bi guy and I aren't dating. He likes girls, and I don't date straight guys. Technically, everything I would say was true without revealing the truth. I hate dating closet cases. It feels like they're ashamed of me. Never again, man. Never again. My family thinks I'm happy and at such a good place in my life when I'm actually at my lowest and not knowing what to do with myself. I'm extremely positive with them just so they don't give me speeches. Oh hi, I think we're the same exact person. I said that I beat Temple Run to a high school buddy. At 50 million points, you go into an underground cavern. At 100 million, you go back above ground. At 150 million, you jump into a US military chopper and fly off into the distance. Everyone I told believed me until someone googled it a month later. I still think a few people actually believed it. I have yet to get past 1.5 million. I can't wait to see the underground cavern. I almost hope this gets buried. There was this friend of mine in high school who wasn't really a friend of mine. One of those kids you know, and your friends like, but you just can't freaking stand. Let's call him H. Well, he was dating this chick that I always had the bonus for. Let's call her R. So I start talking to H and getting all buddy and crap, and eventually this dude I don't like at all considers me his best friend. Q phase 2. I start talking to R, coercing her and crap, and eventually I let out a string of lies about how H has been cheating on her for months, but that because I cared about her, I couldn't let it go on without her knowing. Phase 3. R tells H he knows he's been cheating and that I told her. H says that he knows me better than that, and that I wouldn't make up some lie, and H begins accusing R of trying to make him turn on his best friend. Inevitably they break up. I proceed to bang this girl for like 3 months while she's in the off-on state with H. TL. DR. 16-year-old me is a freaking butthole, but I admire his determination. Sociopathic manipulation for the win. I have a birthmark in the center of my palm that vaguely resembles a gunshot wound or any kind of puncture wound. I've made up a story about how my dad took me to a range and I got shot in the hand, and now have wires in my hand Luke Skywalker style. They inevitably ask about an exit wound, so I say I have skin grafts on the back of my hand that just look so good because they've been on there for so long. It's gotten me many phone numbers. I also used it to get free food once. A cashier at a McDonald's in Maryland thought I was the second coming of Jesus, so I rolled with it and got my Big Mac meal for free, as well as blessed his family and stuff. I'm now fairly certain that if there was a god, I'd be going to heck. After a college friend threw gum out the window of a car, I told her that turtles eat it and die because they can't spit. She felt awful for the next year, mostly because I always reminded her, until the last month or so of school when I told her the truth. Turtles love gum. I'm not married. That's not a completely accurate statement, but it's a decent enough quick summary. Basically, I got involved in an online relationship when I was 16. I was living in England, the woman in California. Come 18, and the relationship's still ongoing. I decided that it would be an absolutely brilliant idea to move to the US to be together when I finished up the 2-year college course I was taking. The problem was that I knew there was no way that my family would be in support of this plan, their argument being that I was too young and had too much growth yet to do before making a commitment like that they would turn out to be correct. So I did it without telling them. I planned out the whole visa application without telling them the truth about how I was getting into the country. I honestly don't remember exactly what I told them. I'm 99% certain that at least my dad saw through it just before I left the country. He outright told me not to do anything so stupid as to go off and get married. Lied to his face. Told him I wouldn't. In my stupid teenage mind, the plan was to just proceed as if we weren't married, then have a ceremony a few years down the line and pretend like that was when we got married for basically forever. No, the concept of how to keep the two families from talking ever entered our heads. The marriage eventually fell apart, as was inevitable, in hindsight. As an act of spite, once it did, my ex-wife contacted my mum and told her everything. She immediately flew over with my grandmother, the first time I'd seen them in about 4 years, for one of the most awkward, painful conversations of my entire life. In the end, it all worked out for the best. I'm still living in the US as a permanent resident, having been here for 10 years now. I'm currently trying to get the funds together to take the citizenship test and have built a great life here. But knowing how badly I hurt my family by doing that is something that's weighed heavily on my ever since and probably always will. TL. DR. Lied about being married to my family. Ex-wife told them when marriage fell apart. The biggest best lie I ever told actually kept me from getting an underage. My buddy and I were drinking at his house. We were both 19. About 2:30 AM we both decide we are hungry. Instead of driving, we decide to walk the mile to the nearest convenience store. We get there, get our snacks, and start to head back. About 50 feet outside of the convenience store we both decide we have to take a pee. Instead of walking back to the bathrooms outside the convenience store, we decide to pee in some trees beside an old trailer. This is when the cops show up. Turns out somebody in a nearby house thought we were prowling and were trying to rob the convenience store. The cops ask for IDs, but me and my buddy both say we don't have any. Total lie, and that we don't even have anything that says our name. We both tell the officers that we are our older brothers because they are both over 21. This is when one of the officers asks us how we paid for our food. This is when I frick up. I tell them I paid with a bank card, which has my name on it, and not the name of my brother. As soon as I say this, the officer asks for the card and immediately sees that I gave him a different name. He then calls us out on not having it. Once the officer has our IDs, he starts yelling at us and asking why we lied to him about who we were. I tell him that I have an Army Special Forces contract lined up and I am supposed to leave in a week. I then embellish a little and say that this is the night of my going away party and that the guy with me was my best friend who arranged the whole party. If I got in trouble for anything, especially drinking underage, I would lose my contract and my family would kill me. Upon hearing this, the officers immediately let us go, wish me luck, and warn us not to stop and pee anywhere on the way home. TLDR. About to get an underage. Tell the cops I am going to the military. Get off scot-free. I wasn't a very popular girl in high school. I'd do some really quite pathetic things to get attention. Makes me feel awful thinking about it tbh. But during high school I pretended to have gotten pregnant by the most popular guy in school. It was nice for a while. People actually started to talk to me. I wasn't really pregnant. I was still a virgin. But then it turned out the guy I said got me pregnant didn't actually exist. 2 students made him up, and it just spiraled out of control. Seriously, the entire school was convinced he was real. Needless to say, everyone was hating on the kids that made this guy up pretty hard. It got pretty serious. At one stage the kids had to get escorted from classes by a teacher. They even had their own table in each classroom, so the teacher could keep an eye on them and make sure they were alright. But then everything went back to normal, and gradually everyone went back to not knowing who I was. Very original. Wish I could hear the story from the guys who made up the fake dude. I once convinced my entire high school a student that wasn't real existed. I got the idea from Mash and my friend and I created this kid out of thin air, and for the rest of the semester we got everything we could think of blamed on this kid. It got to the point that people were saying how awesome he was, and a pregnant girl even claimed that her baby was his just to get some attention. When we eventually did come clean about making him up, no one believed us for more than a month because everyone claimed to have met this awesome dude at a party or in the library, and also the one chick who was sure she was having his kid. Turns out the guy she hooked up with just used the name we made up to get into her pants. People eventually got so angry at my friend and I for claiming he wasn't real that we actually had to have a teacher escort us to and from classes because people were trying to beat the crap out of us. The school administration finally convinced everyone by offering the students a reward to come forward, and sure enough he didn't. Although I can't imagine who would have come forward for the low price of $3.50. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.